All right, John King, thanks so much. And right now, polls are about to close in the political powerhouse of California, as well as 3 other states out west. And we have some projections for you now. 2 for Democrats, 1 for a Republican. In California, CNN is projecting that Senator Alex Padilla, who was appointed to that seat after Kamala Harris became the vice president, that he will be elected senator from California, defeating Mark Mosier. In Illinois, CNN is projecting that incumbent Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth will be reelected, defeating Kathy Salvi. And in Idaho, CNN is projecting that incumbent Republican Senator Mike Crapo will be reelected, defeating David Roth. States that are too early to call at this hour. In Washington state, incumbent Democratic Senator Patty Murray is running against a strong challenge from Tiffany Smiley, the Republican. That race right now, CNN deems it too early to call. In Oregon, Senator Ron Wyden running for re-election. That race as well, too early to call. Let's look at the balance of power. As you know, there are 100 seats in the U.S. Senate. Democrats currently have 42 of them. Republicans currently have 44 of them. The fight over these 14 remaining seats is what we're going to be covering for the next few hours. Republicans need to pick up 1 net Democratic seat in order to wrest control of the U.S. Senate. We have some governor's races to report for you now. Let's go to Boris Sanchez.
Jake, a handful of projections to make. In all of them, the incumbent keeping the governor's mansion. We begin in California with Governor Gavin Newsom. Remember, he survived a recall election last year. There are whispers that he may be considering a presidential run in 2024. He easily defeats election questioner Brian Dahle to win re-election in California. In the most expensive governor's race in the country, but perhaps one of the least competitive, incumbent Democrat billionaire J.B. Pritzker, who largely self-funded his own campaign, he defeats election denier Darren Bailey to win re-election in Illinois. Let's get a look at Maine now. There, the incumbent Democrat Janet Mills had a close race this summer with former 2-time Governor Paul LePage, but LePage fumbled a question about abortion rights during a debate, and Mills never looked back, maintaining an advantage in polling. Tonight, she wins another 4 years in Maine. This time, in Idaho, the Republican incumbent Brad Little, he will win re-election in a state that Donald Trump carried by some 60 percentage points in 2020. He defeats educator Stephen Haidt to win re-election in Idaho. Some key race alerts now to bring you, beginning in a true toss-up state in Wisconsin. Remember, Joe Biden won here by a very slim margin in 2020. Right now, Tony Evers leads by 62,000 votes ahead of election questioner Tim Michels, 62% of the vote in the state of Wisconsin. We have an update for you now from Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer growing her lead against Tudor Dixon, the conservative commentator, 98,000 votes ahead, roughly 7 percentage point advantage for Whitmer, 33% of the vote in Michigan. And what would a key race alert slew be without the state of Georgia? Brian Kemp, the Republican incumbent, 305,000 votes ahead right now of Stacey Abrams, about 9 percentage points with 86% of the vote in the state of Georgia. As we hand it over to Casey Hunt with an update on the senators' races, I would be surprised if you didn't update us on Georgia.
Your update would be useless if you didn't have Georgia in there. And of course, we are starting with Georgia yet again, because look at these vote totals. 32,000 votes separate Herschel Walker from Raphael Warnock right now. It's actually a little bit bigger than it has been at some points throughout the night. But look at that, 49.4 to 48.5%. Again, nobody's over 50, heading to a potential runoff. 86% of the vote in. We could see this change back and forth still all night long as these votes get counted, folks. All right, let's move to Wisconsin, where Ron Johnson, the Republican, is sitting at 50.4% to Mandela Barnes' 49.4%. There's about 16,000 votes separating them. And we actually can compare this. What Boris just gave us in the governor's race showed Evers, the Democrat, ahead at 51.2%, about 62,000 votes separating him from the Republican, who is sitting at 47.4%. So you can see this is becoming another one of these examples where we are seeing a difference in terms of people potentially splitting their tickets here. Now let's check in on Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman, man, that's close, 49.5 to 48% over Dr. Mehmet Oz here. So again, the question that I have when I look at this, and Jake, of course, as we know, is from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but John King and David Chalian are going to know what kind of vote is still out, what we're looking at in terms of, is it Philadelphia? That could give the Fetterman campaign some hope. Still a long way to go there. 30% of the votes still out. North Carolina, let's just check in quickly. Ted Budd here, the Republican, sitting at 50.8%. Sherry Beasley, the Democrat, at 46.9%. There's about 143,000 votes separating them at this hour. So perhaps a pretty comfortable place to be when you're looking at 91% of the vote in. Reminder, this is currently a Republican seat. Republican Richard Burr is retiring, Jake.
All right, Casey, thanks so much. And just a reminder, we're looking at 82 competitive House seats. That's really what we're looking at in order to determine whether or not Republicans are going to be able to wrest control of the House of Representatives. Of the 23 competitive seats that Republicans need to win in order to take control, they are currently leading in 17 of them, 17 out of 23. So that's pretty good. Let's take a look at the Democrats now. Democrats have a taller order on their hands. They need to win 50 of the 82 competitive seats. Right now, they're leading in 35 of them. So neither party is where they need to be. Republicans have a slightly easier job to do in terms of what they need to do. Let's take a look at where we are right now in the battle for control of the House of Representatives. And again, this is where the vote, these are not called races necessarily. This is where the vote is.
This is where the vote is. As you fill in across the country, we're now at the West Coast poll closings. We'll get more and more. So this is everything, all 435 districts. Narrow it down just to make it easier to understand the stakes in the battleground competitive districts. You bring them up now, and you just see, just as you're just looking at the map, you don't have to do the math to see more blue than Republicans had hoped. You still mentioned the key point, though. This is a very tough climate for Democrats in that the margin is so small. Republicans need only a net gain of 5, right, which is eminently doable when you look at the map. But we talked earlier, could Republicans pick up seats in New England? Again, we're not done now, but let me just stretch it out for you a little bit. Stretch out the map in New England. If you look at the map right now, again, a lot of these races are not called. Republicans thought they could pick up 1 or 2 in New Hampshire. They'd pick up 1 in Maine. They might get 1 in Rhode Island, and they might get 1 in Connecticut. They're all blue at the moment. They're all blue at the moment. So if you had a lot of red on this map here, just in the New England region, you'd be thinking that would be the building block to a wave. You have no such building block here. Doesn't mean Republicans won't get the majority, but you don't have it. And so, again, some of these races yet to be called, including the main race. I just want to peek at it and bring it up here. Ranked choice voting, this could go on for a while, but you see, we just called the Democratic governor's reelection, the Democratic candidate here in what is a Republican +6 district. Jared Golden has proven he's a tough Democrat, often at odds with his national party. He's leading there. Again, still a ways to go. Let's come down to the state of New York and the competitive districts there. If you walk right through it here, I still want to peek in on this one. This is Sean Patrick Maloney. He's the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. 65% of the vote now, and he is losing by 11 points. If you look at that, doesn't mean we're done. We still have more votes to count, but this would be a trophy for Republicans in their quest not only for a House majority, but to knock off a very prominent Democrat and a deputy of the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. And so, Jake, as we go back to you, we're still working on the House math. It looks okay for Republicans, but doesn't look like a blowout.
Certainly not. And we have another big projection for you right now. CNN is projecting that in the state of New Hampshire, live free or die, Democratic incumbent Senator Maggie Hassan will be reelected, defeating retired General Don Bolduc. Maggie Hassan will be reelected. CNN is projecting this is a seat that Republicans thought they could win. They thought they could defeat Hassan. They were very bullish. They were talking all week about momentum being their way. And instead, Maggie Hassan, the Democratic senator, holds on to that seat CNN is projecting. Let's look at the balance of power right now in the U.S. Senate. You know, 100 seats. Democrats currently control 43 of those seats, with the Hassan keeping her seat. Republicans have 44 of them. There are 13 seats remaining. Republicans need to pick up 1 net Democratic seat in order to wrest control of the U.S. Senate. Those 13 seats are what we are waiting to see to determine if they are able to achieve that. But there are governor's races, too, and we're going to go to Boris Sanchez with some major news there.
Jake, there is a major projection we are making right now. Incumbent Republican Brian Kemp is projected to win re-election in the state of Georgia. This is a huge deal for Kemp. Remember, he drew Donald Trump's ire back in 2020 when he refused to find those 11,000 or so votes that Trump was looking for. Kemp, known for restricting abortion access in Georgia, for remaking the state's voting system, the electoral system there. And of course, his defeat over Stacey Abrams stamps him earning another term in the state of Georgia. Let's turn it over now to Dana Bash for some analysis. Dana.
Thank you so much, Boris. And we did just get word that Stacey Abrams called and conceded. This is a very big win for Governor Kemp. Not necessarily a surprise, given the way that we've seen it go, but very, very clear, decisive win for a Republican governor who split from Donald Trump and led the state of Georgia in a way that obviously his constituents approved of.
I mean, he not just split from Trump. Trump tried to take him down in the Republican primary with former Senator David Perdue, and Republicans in Georgia rejected that. And you're exactly right. They rejected it because, first, Republicans, now the entire state, voters liked the way Brian Kemp was running the state. And I think the biggest thing was the way he handled COVID. In fact, remember, when he opened up the state, Trump said, this is back in the spring of 2020, I think he may be going a little too fast. It turned out that there were no great severe repercussions in Georgia. They reopened the state. The economy came back.
And Trump tried to take him out in the primary and failed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that became a really key part of his message to Georgia voters, that he wasn't beholden to Trump. He didn't get weighed down by some of the negatives, the clear negatives associated with Trump and all the shenanigans. I mean, remember, in the state of Georgia, Trump did not do particularly well, and Kemp is overperforming him.
I'm going to go right over to Boris for a projection.
Yeah, Dana, another major projection just minutes after the last one in the state of Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro, the Attorney General, will become the new governor of that state. Shapiro had a big lead in fundraising, a big lead in polls throughout. He continued to tie Doug Mastriano to Donald Trump, and it appears to have paid off. He takes over the open seat left behind by term-limited Governor Tom Wolf. Dana?
Thanks so much, Boris. So Josh Shapiro becoming the next governor of Pennsylvania, and sort of a pattern that we've just seen in the last 10 minutes of Republicans who are election deniers losing, both in the governor's race, Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, and then in New Hampshire, the Senate race there, Don Bolduc. He definitely was a rabid election denier in the primary there. Then he kind of switched back for a nanosecond in the general, and then went back again. I wonder if at the end of the night we're going to be able to say anything about that as a pattern, or maybe these are two isolated incidents.
Well, exactly, because we'll have to see. There are a lot of races
what happens when we go out west?
I mean, affirmatively, Josh Shapiro, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, very popular, and somebody who fought Donald Trump when he was contesting the results of the election in 2020 in Pennsylvania. Mastriano just way too far to the right for Pennsylvania. An election denier, was down in Washington on January 6th, arranged buses there, very strongly anti-abortion. This was really never a competitive race.
And then the two questions we still have, we just talked about Kemp, we're projecting him to win in Georgia, and Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. One of the storylines of the night that is still a big question mark is whether or not they can bring their fellow Democrats across the finish line in the Senate races.
Right. I mean, I think that you're going to see the question is sort of moving in opposite directions in those states. In Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro was doing so much better than Fetterman really throughout this race. And will that poll help Fetterman in what is still a very, very tight race? That remains to be seen. In Georgia, you know, Brian Kemp has been able to really perform well ahead of Herschel Walker in that race. Again, will he be able to pull Herschel Walker up?
And as you're talking, I just want to point out that on the screen you see how incredibly close it is. Yeah, John Fetterman at 49%,
look, you're
Oz
seeing
at 48.
voters basically saying, we're going to make different choices from the top of the ballot to further down. And that's not often something that we see in American politics, but I think it says a lot about these candidates up and down the ballot. There are just factors with the candidates that are changing the way voters interpret what they need to do, and they're splitting from what they might want to do.
And there's evidence that as we talk about it, as we're looking at those numbers, Walker now 49.5, Warnock 48.5, nobody yet at 50.
And one point, in addition to what Abby said, it's not just a matter of the candidates, it's also that the Senate is up for grabs
Yeah.
here. And I think a lot of people aren't just voting for one of the candidates or the other. They're also thinking, who do I want to be running the U.S. Senate? Do I want the Republicans? Do I want the Democrats? So, and that's different from the governor's race. I mean, this has a different stake to it.
I will say this also about the Pennsylvania governor's race. Josh Shapiro ran very hard on the issue of abortion, and he could make a credible case. I mean, Doug Mastriano was very far to the right on the issue of abortion and would have been a key player if that state were to move to restrict abortion rights. And Josh Shapiro ran on that immediately, and he ran on it very hard throughout
Also
this
election
race.
rights. Remember, in Pennsylvania, the governor appoints the Secretary of State, so he would have had a lot of control over the 2024 election.
I just want to mention just quickly one more time, New Hampshire. That is a heartbreak for Republicans because even though Maggie Hassan is an incumbent Democrat, she was governor, they of late thought, well, maybe Don Bolduc could actually overtake her and that could be a pickup. I think you're going to see a lot of questions about what happened there because Mitch McConnell's super PAC pulled their money out of that race. And the National Republican Senatorial Committee tried to put more money in, but it didn't do it. It was too late.
Yeah, I mean, I think they always look. Bolduc was not the candidate that they wanted,
like
right?
we talked about, yeah.
They knew that he would be a pretty tough sell, even in New Hampshire, where it's a little bit more of a free-thinking state, I guess you could put it. But toward the end, I think this last couple of weeks in this election has really tightened up a lot of these races, giving Republicans hope. But what we are starting to see tonight is that some of these states are reverting back to their DNA. I think New Hampshire reverted back to its kind of middle-of-the-road DNA and rejected some of these more extreme candidates. And I think you're seeing that even in some of the districts that we've been seeing tonight, surprises for Democrats holding on to.
One of the other interesting things in that state was, remember, Democrats actually campaigned against a much more moderate Republican in the Republican primary, the state Senate president, Chuck Morris, because they thought Bolduc would be an easier candidate. We've seen this in several states.
And that was a gamble that paid off.
Right. In this particular case, it paid off. In some other places, like Michigan,
off,
it may not.
I'm going to go over to Jake for a projection.
That's right, Dana. We have a major projection right now. CNN is projecting that in Ohio, venture capitalist J.D. Vance will defeat Congressman Tim Ryan and be the next U.S. Senator from the state of Ohio. J.D. Vance will be elected the next senator from Ohio, taking the place of retiring Republican Senator Rob Portman. The balance of power right now, 100 seats in the Senate, 43 of them belong to Democrats, 45 of them belong to Republicans, 12 seats remain. All Republicans need to do is pick up one net Democratic seat, and they will be able to wrest control of the U.S. Senate. Let's go to Melanie Zanona right now, who is at Vance headquarters. Melanie, big achievement for a man who's never been elected to anything before.
Right, that's exactly right. And I am being told that Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan has called J.D. Vance to concede in this race. You know, Tim Ryan was always viewed as the underdog. He thought that this race was overlooked and that he could have had a lot of support from the National Party. As you can hear, the crowd is getting very excited right now as this race is being called. A lot of energy in the room right now. But J.D. Vance is someone who is going to be very different than his predecessor. His predecessor, Rob Portman, a longtime centrist. J.D. Vance, meanwhile, has been a fierce supporter of Donald Trump. He's been an election denier, a 2020 election denier, although he did say he will accept the results tonight. Have yet to hear whether he's going to come out and make a speech. We're expecting that to happen at some point, but we will keep you posted, Jake.
All right, Melanie Zanona, J.D. Vance headquarters in Ohio. CNN projecting that J.D. Vance will be the next U.S. Senator from Ohio. Let's take a look at the big picture of the U.S. Senate. Right now, Democrats leading at 48, Republicans leading 48, one in a Republican seat, one in a Democratic seat. It's really quite something.
And so a couple different ways to look at it. Let's just start with our live vote count. You look at the map. That's the Democrat leading in the Republican seat. That's the Republican leading in the Democratic
Pennsylvania
seat.
and Georgia,
Pennsylvania and Georgia, Pennsylvania and Georgia. How many times have we said Pennsylvania and Georgia? Remember, coming into the night, Democrats thought maybe if we have a good night, we could pick off either North Carolina, Ohio, or Wisconsin. Well, two of the three are off the board, right? This one here, North Carolina. This one, you see Ted Budd with a lead there. Unlikely. We just called the Ohio race for J.D. Vance. You come up here, Republicans hold that. J.D. Vance will replace Rob Portman in the Senate. Wisconsin was the third. It is a very, very close competitive race. Senator Johnson now with a 32,886 vote lead over the Democratic lieutenant governor. Just changed again. It's up to 43,000 now. This is what Republicans count on in these states. They think, as we get through the night and we count the late votes, the DNA kicks in, an incumbent Republican. But we'll see, 69%. Still a ways to go here. So we have to count these votes. But let's just come out here and look at the importance. So we look at the Senate battle for control and use the map this way. Look at the importance for what? First, let's just go back to where we are to remind people. Here's where we started the night. The narrowest of majorities only because you're a Democratic president and your vice president breaks the tie, right? And so now let's come this way and look at it this way. We come into these states. The Democrat is leading right here at the moment. This race is not over. It is not called. Just think about the importance of this race. For now, to begin the conversation, let's say Fetterman holds that narrow lead there. Okay, Herschel Walker is ahead here, right? No one's above 50% right now. So for the purposes of this argument, I'm going to make that a toss-up because neither candidate is above 50%. Right now, again, we're waiting to call Wisconsin. We're still counting votes out west. We'll see what happens in Washington State. We'll see what happens in Arizona. Democrat Mark Kelly has a narrow lead. We'll see if it holds. Republicans are very confident about winning this one. We're still counting votes. Sometimes Nevada takes a while, too. But for the sake of the hypothetical argument, let's say the Republicans are right and they take this. Then where does that leave us? And we come out. It leaves us in a potential situation, if Fetterman can hold on to this, and the Republicans take that and nothing else changes, everything else stays where it is, where it was when we woke up this morning, then we could have a 50 Republican seats, 49 Democratic seats, and we go again to a Georgia runoff in December, assuming none of the candidates gets above 50% there. That's what makes, as we watch the outstanding, that's what makes this math first so important, assuming if Republicans are right and they can take Nevada, and we're not counting votes there yet. If Oz can come back and win this seat tonight, then you come out in this scenario. If nothing else changed on the map, Republicans would have a majority, and this would be for the extra, and the best Democrats to do is 49. Again, that's assuming Republicans are right. They're very confident about Nevada, and that Mark Kelly holds on in Arizona. But it just gets you, if you just come back to where we are, it just gets you into the map that we are in a very narrow chess game for control of the Senate right now, and we have fewer pieces in play, in the sense that we're waiting on Pennsylvania, waiting on Georgia, and then Nevada. Right now, if you're the Democrats, Jake, you're watching Nevada vote count, and you're nervous.
Indeed. And CNN now has two major projections. In North Carolina, CNN projects that Congressman Ted Budd will become the next U.S. Senator, defeating former North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Sherry Beasley. Ted Budd, endorsed by Donald Trump in this primary, and then Donald Trump rallied for him throughout North Carolina. He will become the next U.S. Senator from North Carolina. In Connecticut, this one's no surprise, incumbent Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal will be reelected, defeating Republican Leora Levy. Let's take a look at the balance of power at this hour. As you know, 100 Senate votes. Democrats have 44 of them. Republicans have 46 of them. There are 10 seats remaining. 10 seats remaining. And CNN reminds you, of course, that Republicans just need to pick up one net Republican seat and one net Democratic seat in order to take control of the U.S. Senate. So that's where we are, 44 to 46. And Casey Hunt has some announcements for us at the Senate desk.
We do, Jake, and this really shows you, to John King's point, that we are getting down to the brass tacks here in the Senate as we try to figure out which way it's going to go, perhaps by one seat. And let's start, as always, in Georgia, where Herschel Walker has a very narrow lead over Raphael Warnock, just 15,000 votes, which is such a small amount considering the millions that have been cast. We've got 88% of the vote in there. Election officials saying we might not know tonight. Pennsylvania, John Fetterman at 49.2%, Mehmet Oz at 48.3%, 37,000 votes separating them, again, among millions cast. And this race is one that we're going to be counting potentially for days here. And as John outlined, this is what will save Democrats if they lose that race out in Nevada, which Republicans are very confident about, and give them a shot to actually retain control. 75% of the vote in Pennsylvania at this hour. Now let's check in on Wisconsin, which remains very close, 51% for the incumbent Ron Johnson over the Democrat Mandela Barnes at 48.8%. This remains very, very close. Mandela Barnes has been underperforming the Democratic governor, Evers. So far tonight, only about we're at 69% of the vote, so we've only got about 30% out of the vote outstanding. Now let's check in on Arizona, where Mark Kelly is sitting pretty comfortably right now, 58%, over Blake Masters, the Republican, at 39.7%. That's a 240 or so thousand vote gap. I want to check in with John King and David Chalian to figure out what kind of votes are outstanding, because there's only about 50% of the vote in Arizona, and we could see that tighten up. But now we're going to turn to Boris, who's got some critical updates in the governor's race.
Yeah, Casey, it's really interesting, as you pointed out, the lead for the Republican in the Senate race in Wisconsin. As we get you a key race alert from that state, the Democratic incumbent in the governor's race is currently leading. Right now, Tony Evers, 43,000 votes ahead of election questioner Tim Michaels. It just changed. Now it's a 45,000 vote advantage with 69% of the vote in Wisconsin. We want to update you on the state of Michigan right now. Gretchen Whitmer, nearly 90,000 votes ahead of conservative commentator Tudor Dixon. It just changed again. Now it's 88,000 votes. The lead slightly thinning there for Gretchen Whitmer with 39% of the vote in Michigan. In Kansas, perhaps the most vulnerable Democratic incumbent running for re-election, Laura Kelly, in a state that Donald Trump won by about 15 percentage points. She currently leads against Derek Schmidt, an election denier. 32,000 vote advantage for Laura Kelly with 83% of the vote in Kansas. Meantime, the most unusual governor's race you're going to see on the map tonight, a three-way race between Tina Kotek, a Democrat, Christine Drazan, a Republican, and former Democrat turned independent Betsy Johnson, right now the Democrat in this race, with an 18,600 vote advantage, 53% of the vote in there. We send it back over to Jake Tapper. Jake.
Thank you so much, Boris. And I just want to remind everybody of the competitive seats. There are 82 competitive seats. Republicans have to win 23 of them, and they are leading in 22 of them. So that's for control of the U.S. House. Republicans on their way. Of the 23 competitive seats they have to win, they're currently leading in 22. What about Democrats? What do Democrats have to do? They have to win 49 of the 82 competitive seats, 49 of them. And right now they are leading in 42 of them. Not bad, but not as close as where the Republicans are. And I want you to take a look at some of these margins right now when it comes to these House races. In Oregon, Alex Skarlatos is ahead by 0.08%. In Iowa, Zach Nunn up by 0.18%. In California, Congresswoman Michelle Steele up by 0.4%. In New York, Molinaro up 0.67%. In Arizona, Eli Crane up 1.38%. And Democrats, too, their leads are pretty narrow as well. We're looking at Kermit Jones up by 0.06% in California, and Tony Vargas up by 0.15% in Nebraska. Congressman Ryan is up by 0.36% in New York. Tom Malinowski in New Jersey up by only 0.88%. And then Connecticut, Johanna Hayes up by 1.72%. These are competitive seats, and the margins of victory right now are so narrow, so narrow. We haven't called any of those competitive races, and the truth is any one of them could flip at any second as the votes come in, John.
It is remarkable, and we're beginning to fill in the map all the way over now. You see this blue, especially along the Southern California coast, the blue up here in Washington and Oregon. Keep an eye on that as we get later into the deep vote count overnight, probably tomorrow as well, because you do have competitive races out there as well. So let's just isolate the competitive races. That's what I was talking to you. See out here, many of you remember Katie Porter. She's a prominent Democrat progressive. Her district in Southern California is a competitive race. But let's just come to the middle of the country for a minute and look at these races, because you said here's another one of these vulnerable frontline Democrats, Alyssa Slotkin. You look at this right now and you say 43%, the Republican has a lead. I just want to isolate it by county to go through some of this is what's going on in their campaign headquarters right now. Remember, Spanberger held on, right? Slotkin's another one of those frontline Democrats. This is a Democrat 0+9. It's a 50-50 district. Joe Biden won it by less than 1 percentage point by these lines. So you're looking at this, you're saying red county, red county, red county. This is a very Republican county by 20 points, but it's a small county population-wise. Most of the people in this district live here. They live in Ingham County, which is Lansing. Right? It's a 32-point. Joe Biden won this county by 32 points, and only 11% of the vote is in. So Alyssa Slotkin, when you pull out to the district, she's losing right now, but we only have 11% of the vote counted in the giant, by far, the largest county within the district. So this one here is far from over. You pull it out, let's come back, there's the Michigan and the Midwest. Let's pull out to the national map. Jake was just talking about how close many of these races are. These are just the competitive races, right? So you want to look at win margin. The lighter the color, the more the spread is here. Let me get that to kick in. Look at all these races that are incredibly competitive as you go through them. Let's pop up the state of New York. Just walk through. Up here in the Rochester area, you have a Democratic incumbent who's losing, Joseph Morell losing 49. It's a point race, but it's 3,300 votes. And you see it's up by county now, and you see it's Rochester in the county. Let me turn the county off and get to the entire district and come out here. Another race right down here. You have, I think Jake mentioned this one, Mark Molinaro, the Republican candidate against Josh Riley, 50.3 to 49.7, 1,700 votes. This is the environment that's playing out across the country tonight. Democrats fighting to hold their House majority, or at least to keep any new Republican majority as small as possible. One race that's not close, if you look here, this is the chairman of the Democratic Campaign Committee who, with 68% of the vote in, is losing quite significantly. We'll see if that holds up. But again, I said this earlier, this would be a trophy for Republicans because he's such a prominent lieutenant of Nancy Pelosi and runs the campaign fundraising arm. But that one is not done yet either. And I just want to pull out back to the national map again, where you see the white or the lighter, those are your closer competitive races, so they are coast to coast. The vote count tends to be more early out here, but we pop up the race here and look as well. Tom O'Halloran, a vulnerable Democrat in the state of Arizona, losing by 2,100 votes to Eli Crane. These are the building blocks. If you're trying to think Republicans need a net gain of 5, it's these frontline Democrats who are in the tough districts that you're going to watch, especially as we get closer to knowing, calling more races in the east and coming out to the west. And so you see more light races out here. We'll continue to count them. Again, Republicans favor to take the House majority, but you're looking at this map right now, Jake, and it is incredibly competitive. The Democrats fighting tenaciously, at least to limit that.
That's right, John, and we have some more projections for you for the U.S. Senate. CNN projects in Washington State incumbent Democratic Senator Patty Murray will hold on to her seat, defeating a challenge from Republican Tiffany Smiley. Patty Murray, Senator Patty Murray, reelected, CNN projects. And then just south of Washington, in Oregon, CNN projects that incumbent Democratic Senator Ron Wyden will defeat a challenge from Joe Ray Perkins. So that's 2 Democratic seats held on. Where does that leave us in the balance of power? Obviously, you know, 100 seats. Right now, we have Democrats with 46 of them, Republicans with 46 of them, 8 seats remaining. Remember, Republicans just need to pick up 1 net Democratic seat in order to wrest control of the U.S. Senate. Right now, it's 46-46. And John King, big picture. Let's look at the U.S. Senate here. We have 48 Democrats leading, 1 in a Republican seat. That's Pennsylvania. 49 Republicans leading, 1 in a Democratic seat. That's Georgia.
Right. And so the question was, were there any takeaways on the map? Could the Democrats pick up Republican seats? Could Republicans, more likely you would think, at least at the beginning of this midterm election year, pick up? And what we're seeing right now is remarkably low turnover in a 50-50 Senate. You mentioned they're not called races, but the ones that are tilting the other direction right now, very close. John Fetterman, this is a Republican-held seat. The incumbent, Pat Toomey, did not run for re-election. So you have the lieutenant governor, the Democrat John Fetterman, against Mehmet Oz, the TV celebrity Dr. Oz, 49.2, 48.3. Just shy of 80% of the vote, but we know this from living through competitive elections in Pennsylvania. We're going to be counting for a while here. I just want to take a peek at where the outstanding vote is. And you see the majority of it. If you're in the Fetterman campaign, you're saying, okay, the majority of the outstanding vote is down here, Philadelphia and the suburbs around it. The only caveat I would add to that, though, is there's a test. We don't have enough of the vote in there yet to see if Oz can perform better than Trump in the suburbs. We'll see if that plays out. But if you're the Fetterman campaign, you're looking, most of the vote is down here. That's what benefited Joe Biden as the count went on in Pennsylvania in the presidential race. We will see. Let's come back out here and let's check in again. On this one, it's been a seesaw all night, but Herschel Walker maintaining his lead, but it's a tiny lead. 14,976 votes, 49.2 to 48.8. Walker is ahead, but as I know we sound redundant here, but it's important. You need 50% plus 1 vote, or else there's a December 6th runoff in Georgia. So keep an eye on that. Both campaigns will tell you if Chase Oliver starts getting up around 2.5, 2.6, then we're guaranteed to go to a runoff. We'll see where it is right now. 88%, Jake. Still some more votes to count. Again, let's take a look. What are we missing in terms of outstanding vote? You know, you see the biggest circles are up in Atlanta and the suburbs, but you see some Republican areas here, Republicans here, and I want to emphasize this point. These are small circles, meaning as a percentage of the statewide outstanding vote, that's a pretty tiny amount. But that's a lot of Republican counties.
That's a lot of circles.
That's a lot of Republican counties.
Yeah.
So it's 50 votes here, 80 votes there, 250 votes there. There's a lot still to be counted. So we have a long way to go in Georgia. Plenty of room for Warnock to get a lot of votes, a lot of room for Walker to get a lot of votes by piecing together little pieces.
So I want to bring in Brianna Keeler at the voting desk right now to give us some insight into what she's seeing in Georgia.
Yes,
Brianna.
so let's look at some of these key counties here in Georgia, because just a short time ago, there was a top official in the Secretary of State's office who said that the Georgia Senate race is one race that we may not have full clarity on by the time we all go to bed tonight. I guess it depends on when you're going to bed tonight, but nonetheless, so we're learning
you sleep election week?
No, it's not allowed, actually. It's part of our job description. But we're learning some new details about Fulton County. So let's look at Fulton County first, because they're actually more than halfway done with counting. We're hearing here that they're expected to be finished by midnight, John and Jake. So that could be revealing some information here just in the next half hour.
Absolutely. Very interesting.
And so you look at it, and then go through the rest. Again, you look at the margin here, 73. This is Fulton County, Atlanta. It's by far 159 counties. Georgia has a lot of them, but it's 10% of the population. So it's your largest. Atlanta and the suburbs around it are your largest basket of votes. 73.7%. Again, we've called the governor's race here. Stacey Abrams at 69%. This is why Brian Kemp is reelected. In a Democratic area, you say 30%. You know, he got shellacked. Well, he narrowed the margin some.
Right.
And you come back to the Senate race, Herschel Walker getting shy of 25% in Atlanta and the closest in suburbs around it. That matters.
Can I ask, how did Biden do in Fulton County in 2020?
2020, presidential race.
72.6.
72.
And Warnock is a little bit ahead, 73 point something. Okay,
There you go.
73.7.
Yeah, 74 if you round up. I'm sorry, Brianna.
Brianna, go ahead.
County, remember there were 6 precincts that opened a little later today in Georgia, and so they stayed open a little later tonight. 2 of those were in Cobb County, so they stayed open a little later. They are also halfway done on their count. We don't know, though, we don't have an estimate on when the counting is going to be finished here, so we're actually not sure when we're going to be getting this better picture of what's happening there.
Cobb County.
So again, Joe Biden wins this county by 14 points, right? So that's what you see right there, 15 points. It's essentially tracking the presidential race in Cobb County. And again, Herschel Walker, you know, in the governor's race, this is why Brian Kemp gets reelected. He gets
7 points higher.
He gets 48. This is one of those counties. Again, if you go back, the suburbs used to be Republican territory, or at least very competitive territory. In the Trump age, 2018 election, the suburbs made Nancy Pelosi Speaker. 2020, they made Joe Biden president. You come forward to the Senate race here. That is the challenge of our time. Without Donald Trump, can Republicans become more competitive in the suburbs? In Brian Kemp's Georgia, the answer is yes for him, not so much for Herschel Walker.
Where did Newt Gingrich represent, former Republican Speaker?
Right up in this area.
That's what I thought.
The lines have been drawn so much, but you're in the same
area.
Right out here,
That's
right.
what I thought. Okay.
So finally, we're looking at Gwinnett County. They have counted at this point about 30% of the votes. They are saying they will not wrap up by midnight tonight, so we're waiting to see exactly when they're going to wrap up. But of course, these are all counties that are leaning Democrat, so obviously that is going to perhaps shift things as we see these numbers coming in.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
And so to that point, just 56% estimated vote counted in Gwinnett, right? It's the second largest county in the state. It's just shy of 9% of the vote. And so that's why, number one, it matters when it comes to, it's a Democratic county. Warnock will get more votes. The question is, will he keep that margin, the big margin he has now? So that you watch these come in and you go up from here, right? You know, if you keep this margin in the places where there are more votes, you're gonna move up. Again, I just want to come back to this just for the context, though, because yes, most of the votes are here. Right? You see a couple of large red circles in more Republican areas where there's a lot of votes out. The larger the circle means the larger share of the votes out. And you say these little, they look almost like polka dots. Well, you know, they don't matter. But they do. They do when you're running up margins like that. Right? You know, when you're running up margins like that. And so if you keep getting, it's a tiny.
That's 8,000 votes?
Right.
You know?
Right. It's 8,000 votes there. So if you add a couple hundred or a couple dozen even in a close race, it matters, which is why this is a state. You know, you can look at things, you can have trends. The campaign headquarters are going through precinct by precinct. You look at a race this close with that much left to count. You just, This is why you brew coffee.
Biden only won the state by under 12,000 votes in 2020. David Chalian, you have some more information at the battleground desk about where the outstanding vote is.
Yeah, or the kind of vote that is outstanding, and it gets to the margin issue as well that John was just talking about. So, again, we break it down: mail vote, early in-person vote, election day vote. I want to note something here. So let me bring in the uncounted vote. Among the mail vote, about a quarter of the mail vote is still out, and that is a 36.5% advantage category for Raphael Warnock. So that's significant because a quarter of it is still out. He also has an 8.4% advantage among early in-person voting, but there's very little left of that to count. Here is what I find super interesting. Herschel Walker's margin of success over Warnock with election day voters is now at about 19.1%, a little bit lower than we had seen earlier. And there was a huge amount of the election day vote uncounted when we talked about this race earlier, guys. Now it's down to 28.4% that remains to be counted. And I want to remind everyone, I'm going to click off here the election day vote. These two categories of early vote, the mail, early in person combined, we expect to be the larger share of the overall vote. We expect that to make up about 61% of the overall vote. The election day vote, which is the Walker category here, where he's beating Warnock by about 19% now with the election day vote, that we expect at the end of the day is going to be about 40% of the overall vote. So we don't think it's going to make up as big of a share as that early vote category in Georgia.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
And so you look at David's point about the proportion, right? So the bulk of the vote that's out, the larger slice, Warnock's getting the bigger margins, and then you see the size of the circles of where geographically in the state it is. That's why if you're in the Warnock campaign, you never want to be behind. But there's plenty of votes here. By the proportions David just laid out with the early voting and the mail votes, if it continues, if they continue to come in as disproportionately Democratic as they are now, and you see the size of the circles, meaning the share of where he's got the margin, the percentages of the different kinds of votes, and then you say where are they coming from, and you look at this. This is not over. This is not over, and they're both below 50, by the way. Now we'll see when it comes in.
I have something I want to talk to you about with Pennsylvania, but before we do that, I'm going to throw it to Anderson Cooper, whose august panel wants to chew over all of what we've been doing here.
We finished chewing on the pizza. We're now ready to chew on this, and God knows what else we've been chewing on. There's a lot of food here. Gloria, I mean, this is not the night a lot of Democrats worried about, a lot of Republicans hoped for. It may be different tomorrow in the morning, or in the late afternoon, or the next day, but tonight it looks different than a lot of people thought.
People are voting, and it seems to me, from looking at this so far, that they're voting on their candidates. They're actually saying, I think this person would be a better senator than that other person, and I think, this House member would be better than another one. It just doesn't seem to have any sense of a wave, or, I'm going to vote straight Republican, or we don't see a lot of ticket splitting historically in this country. I know the state of Montana is kind of famous for that. Other than that, we don't see that a lot. And I think what we're seeing tonight is people doing that. I mean, look at look at the state of New Hampshire, for example. You have very popular Republican incumbent governor, and then people elected, and he was up for re-election, Sununu. And then you had Maggie Hassan winning for Senate. So people were splitting their tickets. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, I would just say, like everyone talked about this early on, democracy's on the ballot. I said this earlier, democracy on the ballot, and democracy won tonight, right? I mean, that's the good news for America. As Gloria talking about, in Pennsylvania, you have Josh Shapiro winning up right now by 11 points over Doug Mastriano, which is a landslide for Josh Shapiro. And we're 33,000 votes apart in the Senate race. So people are going through, looking at these candidates and making calls. Van doesn't have to cry tonight. He's going to be probably consoling me here. I'm a lot less optimistic than I was at the beginning of this evening. But it's a night that's it's changing, and we're going to see. We talked about this too. What the number Kevin McCarthy has, under 20 You know, we're talking, people thought maybe 30,
Right.
right?
Right.
If we get 20, I think Republicans will be happy to walk away with a net gain of 20 and take their ball and go home tomorrow.
I think
Yeah,
I'm
sorry.
well, just that I think that big sound that you hear is Democrats having a big sigh of relief across the country because people woke up scared this morning. People said, "My God, we've got these election deniers. We've got these people who are winking and nodding at insurrectionists. We've got people who we are afraid if they get in there, they're going to do terrible things, and we're just going to get steamrolled." That was the fear this morning.
I got to say, Vin, you were the person for days, saying, no, you were the person for days saying the people I'm talking to on the ground are knocking on the doors, are telling me they're optimistic about what
exactly. When you were listening to the people on the doors and on the ground, what happened was people got scared of those Republican polls saying that this big tidal wave was coming, and people said, "Heck no."
But you know what?
And let me just, you get your turn. I'll give my turn. And Obama came out, and that helped. And people fought. And I think the grassroots folks, if there had been more money spent on them than on these dumb ads, you'd have an even bigger firewall against this stuff.
David, actually, let me ask you, the Democratic strategy in some races of actually, you know, getting ads for some of the more extreme candidates like Mastriano, was that successful?
Well, apparently so. Certainly in that case, it was. And yeah, as you look across, I mean, we have to wait and see how.
But in New Hampshire, didn't they give money to Boulder?
Yeah,
last minute they did.
Boulder.
Yeah.
In New Hampshire.
You know, on the whole, probably so. But
because it was controversial, a lot of people
I mean,
thought it inappropriate. You know.
Do I what?
Yeah, a lot of people. You know, it was controversial.
Yeah, no, it was controversial. It was controversial. And it was a gamble, and it looks like the gamble may pay off. But you know, I think that it's more than looking at the candidates. That's certainly that's part of what's going on. But there are, I mean, this sort of defies history. This, if it keeps going in this direction, and you know, there are races out west we have yet to see. But if it keeps going in this direction, I was just scrolling through the House races, this is not like a normal midterm election. And we had been talking here about whether or not gravity would take hold, whether the normal thing would happen, and that, you know, the president's approval rating is low, the economy is bad, therefore the challenging party will make significant gains. There were but the question was, would these other things come into play? The Dobbs decision, extremism, Trump, all of these have played into this to make this not the normal midterm election, and it's really, really interesting.
Then Scott Jennings, I mean, how much of the blame, I mean, if, again, depending on what happens in the coming hours, but if some of these candidates that Trump selected or pushed for don't deliver, how much of the blame does he get?
I mean, there's a
Here
possible...
comes another DeSantis commercial.
Well, I don't have to make a commercial when a guy wins that big.
All right.
I mean, I'm just saying, I mean, there's a potential narrative out of this night that if you're a discerning Republican voter trying to figure out the future direction of this party, we once again learned that Trump is not a national winner for the Republicans, but DeSantis may be the next evolution of someone who can marry what you like about Trump, but also recover some people that went away from the party during Trump. I don't know what's going to happen for the rest of the night. On the Senate, by the way, I'm like a broken record. It's really the three: Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. And Georgia is, you know, really close. Pennsylvania is sort of close. And then Nevada, we haven't started getting results in there yet. If Republicans win 2 out of 3 of those, they'll be home. And so that would salve the wound of not feeling like you had a wave. But that's where it's at in the Senate. But just looking around this map, I mean, boy, if I were Ron DeSantis or someone who wanted to help Ron DeSantis, that is the message I would be on tomorrow, which is my way is the way to a national majority. His way is the way to a national minority.
Well, the fact is this is not an Obama-style shellacking by any means. This is not, you can't really call this a red wave, even though we still have some outstanding votes. So to Scott's point, this is the time that the Republican Party needs to ask themselves, are they going to continue to nominate poor quality candidates to appease Donald Trump? He's right now over on his Truth Social site celebrating the demise of Republicans who lost, criticizing Don Bolduc, a bad candidate. Maggie Hassan was a beatable candidate. That could have been a pickup for Republicans, but solely because of Donald Trump.
He ended up being the nominee. He's celebrating O'Day, a moderate, losing in Colorado. If you want the Republican Party to thrive, we've got to just finally speak out and say, this man is a loser. He lost 2020. He's about to, he's losing his seats that were winnable this time, in time to look toward what the future might look like.
Is there another lesson here also, which is that people are kind of sick of both parties in so many ways? I mean, the fact that it wasn't declarative one way or another, again, we don't know all the results, but that people are just saying, look, I'm going to look at this candidate because, yeah, the Democrats, I don't like the way they've handled the economy, but, the Republicans are threatening democracy, and maybe they're figuring, you know what? I don't like any of these guys, so I'm going to just vote for the candidate.
I think the ticket splitting is encouraging.
I got to go to Boris Sanchez for a projection.
Yeah, Jake, two important projections to bring you, beginning with the race in New York. This race got very close in polling at the end, but in actuality, when the votes were counted, it wasn't very close at all. Incumbent Democrat Kathy Hochul winning her first full term in office. She took over, of course, for disgraced former Governor Andrew Cuomo after he resigned. She defeats Congressman Lee Zeldin to win a first full term in the state of New York. Next, an update for you from the state of Minnesota. Tim Walz, the incumbent Democrat, projected to win re-election there against Scott Jensen, a physician who made some dubious claims about the COVID-19 vaccine. Two Democratic incumbents holding on to the governor's mansion in those two states. As we turn it over to Dana Bash, who has some analysis for us. Dana.
Thank you so much, Boris. Well, on New York, this was a place that President Biden went more than once, where people were looking and saying, is this a situation where high crime, concern about the economy will actually do in a Democrat in a very blue state? And the answer tonight is no.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those issues were very real in this race. I think it was maybe closer than the Democrats wanted it to be. But at the end of the day, the fundamentals of the state of New York kicked in here, and Kathy Hochul is now an elected governor of that state. And I will say this, maybe tomorrow and the day after, we'll be talking a little bit about why didn't people want to believe that this was not as close? I think that a lot of the races tonight are turning out to be they're holds for Democrats in places where I think a lot of Democrats were just nervous about the numbers. They have such PTSD from 2020. We all do. From 2020 and 2018 about not understanding whether the polls are really catching things that were happening.
This goes back to something that you talked about earlier in terms of New Hampshire. A lot of these states are going back to their DNA. Fact is, New York has not had a Republican governor since George Pataki in 2006. And I got to say, the Republicans did make it a lot closer than we thought they were going to, and Lee Zeldin beat Kathy Hochul up on the issue of crime. It seemed to have saliency, and in the last poll I saw, New Yorkers felt crime was a bigger issue than inflation, but in the end, the DNA held. It's a blue state, and Kathy Hochul is the elected governor.
And then the question is, was it actually in danger? And the fact that there was so much attention put on this and other states, kind of like what Van was saying up in New York, that it got Democratic voters energized in a way that they weren't before. Jake?
All right, Dana, we are staying laser focused on those tight Senate races in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Each one is pivotal to determining control of the U.S. Senate. As we wait for more votes to come in and be counted, let's take a quick break and see if the numbers change on the other side. Back after this quick break. It's election night in America. We're waiting for polls to close in Hawaii and Alaska. And while we do, let's give you an update on the status of things right now. In the U.S. Senate, 100 seats. Democrats control 46 of the seats. Republicans control 46 of the seats. There are 8 seats remaining. All Republicans need to do is win one net Democratic seat, and they can wrest control of the Senate. But Republicans are definitely not having the night that they thought they were going to have when it comes to picking up seats. In the U.S. House of Representatives, Democrats control 146 seats. Republicans control 183 seats, but including 5 pickups. 106 seats remaining. Remember, the magic number there is 218. Neither party has achieved that as of yet. Let's look at some of the seats in the competitive races and the state of play. Remember, at the beginning of the night, we told you there were 82 competitive House races we were keeping an eye on. Republicans need to win 23 of them as of now. They're leading in 26 of them. So right now, they are on track to be able to win control of the House of Representatives, but we're not making that call yet. This is just the status as of right now with the votes as of right now. But right now, leading in 26 competitive seats, they need to win 23. How about the Democrats? Democrats need to win 49 competitive seats, and they're leading in 40 competitive seats. So Democrats not where they need to be. But let's go back to the Senate races. I want to bring in Casey Hunt. Casey, tell us what's going on, because we got some Senate races. I need to know what's going to happen.
We may be waiting a little while for that, Jake, but we can give you an update as to where they stand right now, which is to say that Georgia remains as close as ever. 20,000 votes separating Herschel Walker from Raphael Warnock right now. Excuse me. Neither one of them above 50% with 90% of the vote in. This could stretch out for 4 weeks. In Pennsylvania, this continues to tighten. John Fetterman, 49.3%. Mehmet Oz, 48.2%. Remember, this would be a Democratic pickup if Fetterman were to win here, which would protect Democrats if they lost elsewhere on the map, say in Nevada, perhaps, where Republicans feel very good about their chances. But we've got 84% of the vote in, and the count is going to keep going in Pennsylvania. Now let's check in on Wisconsin, where Ron Johnson is maintaining his lead, the Republican incumbent, over Democrat Mandela Barnes, who sits at 48.4%. So right now, we've always expected this race to be very, very close. Johnson is really doing what he needs to do at this hour, 80% of the vote in Wisconsin. And let's check in now on Arizona, where Mark Kelly is sitting at 57.8% to the Republican Blake Masters, 39.9%. That's a pretty comfortable lead. I think we need to know a little bit more about where the vote is still outstanding in Arizona. Let's now check in on Utah. This is a really interesting one. Mike Lee, the incumbent Republican, at 53.7%. He is facing a challenge from independent Evan McMullin. You may remember him from his brief presidential bid. He was in the CIA. He is someone who has mounted a challenge to Lee, hasn't said who he would conference with. Mitt Romney has stayed out of this race. So far, McMullin is behind Lee, but that's a strong number for an independent running in a situation like this, Jake.
Well, one of the great things about these election nights, Casey, is that we have no idea what's going to happen. It's up to the voters, not the pollsters, not the pundits. It's up to the voters, and the voters are giving us some surprises this evening. And probably nobody is more surprised than the man who is the leader of the Republicans in the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy. Let's go check in with Manu Raju. He's at the headquarters of House Republicans. Manu, I think that it's fair to say that by now people thought that it would be a bacchanal at House Republican headquarters. It would be raucous. The champagne corks would be popped. It seems kind of serene.
Yeah, Kevin McCarthy had hoped that this hour, in the 11 p.m. Eastern hour, that he would be out here declaring victory. They were preparing to give a victory speech at this time, but there have been too many races that are too close to call. And talking to his advisors, they are saying they are waiting to see how some key races in the West break, see some key races in the Midwest break before Kevin McCarthy comes out and addresses his supporters. Now, they are still very confident that they will get not just the votes, enough seats to take back the House, but enough seats to have what they consider a comfortable governing majority. They have set a bar at 20 seats, picking up 20 seats. I am told by a Republican source that they are still confident they can get there, in large part because of success they are seeing in New York. They believe that could help them ultimately get to where they want to go. Now, McCarthy himself has met with his political advisors at the National Republican Congressional Campaign Committee this evening, as well as his super PAC that has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in key races, as he has tracked races race by race, talked to some of the candidates whose support he will also need at the end of the day to become Speaker should Republicans regain the House. But Republicans still confident, even though it's going slower than they anticipated, as they wait for the final numbers and for the final margin of a potential majority. Jake?
Yeah, I mean, we should point out, Manu, that earlier this year, Kevin McCarthy was anticipating and talking about how they were going to pick up 60 seats, 60 seats. Now they're talking about 20, and it's not clear that they're going to get there.
Yeah, no question about it. They had expected a huge wave before the Dobbs decision, which changed the dynamics completely. And then ultimately, there were concerns that they could potentially even be a single-digit victory for the Republicans. If it were that narrow, it would make McCarthy's task of governing incredibly difficult, given it would empower some of the folks on the far right of his conference, which is why they've invested a ton of money to expand their potential pickups to around 20 seats. No more are they talking about that 60-seat massive wave. A 20-seat majority they believe would be enough to get their agenda through and not have problems with that right flank of their conference. Can they get there, Jake? Still an open question at this late hour.
All right, Manu Raju at the House Republican headquarters, where they have yet to put on the Kool and the Gang in celebration. Phil Mattingly at the White House right now. What are you hearing from President Biden and his top aides?
You know, Jake, to give you a sense of things, just a few seconds ago, I got a text message from a Democratic official who said, I love the backdrop behind Manu Raju right now. There is a recognition that this is a night that has gone in a different direction, that even in probably their most optimistic view of things, for Democrats and for some White House officials, that this is better than what they could have imagined. Now, keep in mind, if there was one area where White House officials thought that there was a clear path and one thing that they definitely wanted to secure coming out of this night, it would be maintaining that Senate majority. That is not locked in by any means right now. There are still a number of very tight races out there. But when you look at the broader map and talking to White House officials, they understand right now that this is a very different picture than most people were predicting going into the night, and a very different picture than some of them were expecting. Even last night, the president, the congenital optimist himself, made clear that holding on to the House was going to be a very tough task. Now, nobody here is predicting the Democrats will necessarily hold on to the House, but they are very clear that they have won a lot of races that looked like they would be tipping towards Republicans. One in particular stands out when you talk to White House officials. That was the victory of Abigail Spanberger earlier tonight down in Virginia. It was a toss-up race. It was one that Republicans were really targeting, but it was also one that to some degree was personal for the president. It was Abigail Spanberger who criticized the president and his wide-ranging agenda in the New York Times last year after the first major loss for the president in terms of an electoral sense, the Virginia governor's race. Biden called her, joked around with her, ended up visiting her district. White House officials very much wanted her to win because they knew that would be a sign that there was not going to be a wave. This had a potential for being a positive night for them. They won. And right now, they feel pretty good about things, Jake.
Yeah, or at least not a negative night for them, not the kind they were fearing. We have projections for you now, and 5 of them are for Democrats winning, and 1 is for a Republican winning. In Tennessee, Republican Andy Ogles, a former mayor and conservative think tank executive, has flipped a seat in Tennessee. It is a Nashville area district that got much more Republican after redistricting. Democrat Greg Landsman has flipped a seat in Ohio. This is a surprise and a big win for Democrats. He beat longtime incumbent Republican Steve Chabot. This congressional district includes Cincinnati and became a lot bluer after redistricting. Democrat Marcy Kaptur in Ohio, one of the longest-serving members of the House, has been reelected in Ohio. She defeated a far-right Trump supporter who was at or near the Capitol on January 6th. That's after her district was made more Republican. She won anyway. Ohio State legislator Amelia Sykes has won an open seat for Democrats in northern Ohio. It's a swing district that Biden won by 3. Kansas Democrat Sharice Davids has won a 3rd term. She's one of the first 2 Native American women to serve in Congress. That is a tough congressional district. It's a battleground district. She has been reelected. Rhode Island State Treasurer Seth Magaziner has held on to an open seat for Democrats. It's a district Biden won by 14. Republicans thought they could pick it off in a wave year. Apparently, it's not the year they thought they were going to have. Let's look at the balance of power right now in the House of Representatives. Democrats have 155 House seats, including 1 pickup. Republicans have 184 House seats, including 6 pickups. 96 seats remain, the magic number 218. In terms of the state of play, looking at the competitive seats we told you at the beginning of the night, we were keeping an eye on and watching pretty much to determine who was going to be able to control the House of Representatives. Republicans have to win 22 competitive seats. Democrats have to win 44 competitive seats. And right now, we're taking a look at those competitive seats and counting the votes and trying to figure out who is actually going to win. It still seems as though Republicans are on to a possible path to taking control of the House of Representatives. But this is not the night, as you can tell by the crickets chirping behind Manu Raju at the Republican headquarters. This is not the night they thought they were going to have.
No, and what an odd moment, a crossroads moment we're at in this night, in the sense that Joe Biden could well beat the national historical averages here in both the House and the Senate, and yet he could still lose both the House and the Senate.
Right.
In that since going back to the Reagan days, the average of the House, the first midterm, is 31 seats, right? On the map right now, they may get there, but I don't see 31 seats on the map right now for Republicans.
Tough, yeah.
I see them getting a majority right now. It's not done, but I can see that. I'll show it to you in a second. And then the national average since Reagan in your first midterm election in the Senate is -2. Joe Biden, of course, can't lose any. And the Senate, I don't think we're going to know the answer tonight. I'm getting ahead of our people out there, but I don't think we're going to know the answer tonight. But we'll see as we go. So this is the full House as you're watching it fill in, right? And the important part is, we talked earlier, there's one red there in New England. I'll come to in a minute. We talked about Republicans wanted to pick up a bunch in New England, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5. That's a lot of blue. Republicans are trying this. We're still counting out here. But if you see that blue line all the way up the coast, then you're not having a huge Republican night. You can still get a Republican majority, but there were several districts out there they wanted to pick up. And then I want to come here to the middle of the country, and I'm going to change the map in a second and look at the blue there. Because the idea was Republicans were going to have a big night, and they were especially going to have a night in the competitive states. So let's look at the competitive races as we come through here. Just narrow it down to the 82 competitive seats. Yes, there is a path, a very plausible path, even I would say a likely path to a Republican majority. We're not there yet. I'll count them out for you. But look at all this blue. Look at all this blue, again, in New England. So I'm going to do one New England seat left on the board here. This was blue when we looked at it earlier. We talked about this race, Johanna Hayes. If you're looking at this now, the Republicans say, maybe we'll get this one in Connecticut. I would caution. Watch this one as well, because you see the areas in the district that are not filled in. This is New Britain, Connecticut, Democrat by 34 points in the last presidential election. You come up here to Farmington, Connecticut, Democrat by 22 points in the last election. You come here, you're in Avon, Connecticut, Democrats by 23 points in the last election. So the votes that are still out in Connecticut's 5th district, these counties out here, the towns out here, they're not counties, also big Democratic areas.
And just to remind people, Democrats were worried enough about this district, they sent Vice President Kamala Harris there to campaign a few weeks ago.
Right, and Dana mentioned this earlier, and I think Abby as well, the late Democratic scramble when they started to think, okay, some blue states are in trouble. Some blue places are in trouble. The Democrats sort of started moving the bodies around and moving some money around. And it may turn out, again, when we have the final vote, that's a conversation for later in the week. But then you come here. The Republicans were going to pick up a whole bunch in New York, right? Well, they may pick up some in New York. The question is, are you going to get all of them in New York? Sean Patrick Maloney, the Democratic Campaign Committee chairman, is still running behind there. But will there be a massive turnover in New York? You don't see it in the numbers now. But you do see, again, if they pick up that seat, that's 1, and they only need a net gain of 5. So you come back down here, and again, we come through your home state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Just a minute ago, this one here was red, and you see this. This is such a competitive district. If you look at the district, Joe Biden won this district by less than 1 percentage point, 0.6, right? So there you have it. Right, there you have it. This is one of the most competitive places in America, in one of the most competitive states, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This has gone back and forth. It's at 93%.
Charlie Dent's old district.
Charlie Dent's old district. The lines are a little different, but yes, roughly Charlie Dent's old district. And then you come to Matt Cartwright. Again, this is a Republican district. 3 points, Trump would have won it if the lines were the same in 2020. Matt Cartwright at the moment with a bigger margin there, holding on. I was up in these districts about 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. Susan Wild said, if Matt Cartwright and I hold on, we will hold our majority. That may have been overly optimistic, but if they hold on, the margins. And again, Western Pennsylvania, Summer Lee, 99% of the vote in, ahead in a district Republicans wanted to take. This one here, this is a surprise to Republicans here. Chris DeLuzio, we were talking about this area of the state earlier in the Senate race, and we'll talk about it later. But the Democrats, again, holding on there. And you come out.
Is that Connor Lamb's old seat?
That's Connor, as lines are a little different, but that's Connor Lamb's old district. Again, a more moderate centrist Democrat in a tough area. But Democrats are winning in tough areas tonight. That was what the Republicans did not bet on happening. Democrats are winning, or at least fighting in the ones we haven't called, in tough areas. So we come down to Virginia. We've talked about this before. I won't dwell on it. But 2 out of the 3, the Democrats are holding. Republicans thought they could get 2. They had dreamy hopes of getting the 3rd one. That was unrealistic, I think, from the beginning. But this, Phil was just talking about at the White House, it's not just because Abigail Spanberger won. It's because this district is like so many other competitive districts across the country. So if you have a good candidate and she can hold on, then you're thinking we can replicate this as we grow across the country, which is why I want to move now to the Midwest. The state of Ohio. The Republican Senate candidate won. The Republican gubernatorial candidate won re-election, Mike DeWine, in a walk, right? In a walk. And yet, Marcy Kaptur, holding on here, redrawn district, right? You see the red out here? They added this to her district to make it tougher. Thinking in a midterm year, Democratic president's first midterm, Marcy Kaptur, again, another frontline Democrat who managed to scratch and claw district by district her way to re-election. And you can see by the counties here, higher population here in Toledo, that's how she does it.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure, please.
Just interject one thing. This guy, J.R. Majewski, who lost, we've called this race. Right. Not only was he there on January 6th at the Capitol, according to press reports, he lied about his combat service. I think one of the lessons that we're going to learn, and it's early yet, of course, is when Republicans put normal candidates out in these competitive seats, they can win. And then when they put extremists out, they make it much easier for the Democrats to hold on to the seats or to win.
Absolutely. Candidate quality matters. And the flip side of that is Republicans would have said, A, we made her district tougher. B, friend of Nancy Pelosi, in an anti-democratic year, we're going to finally get Marcy Kaptur. She goes home every weekend. She cuts the ribbon. She shows up in the right places. She works the district, right? Now, I say that about Democrats or Republicans who do it. She puts the work in to be able to scratch it out. She has a brand. She has a local brand that can sometimes overcome national dynamics. But again, Republicans thought they could pick up some of these seats. Look at this seat here. This is a newly drawn district here. You have the Democratic candidate ahead, 14,000 votes. This is one Republicans. What you figure your Senate candidate's winning, your gubernatorial candidate's winning big. Why don't we pick up this district? It's only Democrat +3. That has been the challenge, right? Republicans thought anything Biden won by 1 point is ours. Anything Biden won by 2 points is ours. They thought they could get districts. Abigail Spanberger's is 6 points. This is Biden won this district by only 3 points. The Democrat is scratching and clawing tonight. And then here, this is a pickup. It's a redrawn district, more favorable to Democrats.
But he's been in Congress forever.
He was in Congress, he lost, and then he came back, way back in the Tea Party years. I've been around a while. This, with the redrawn lines, this is a Democratic district. Yeah. So, so it's not a shock that the Democrat won it, but in a year, again, where the Republicans think we're taking Democratic territory, we are taking back places we lost, especially in the suburbs in the Trump years, that's a big win. That is a big win for the Democrats because Republicans need net 5. That's a Democratic takeaway of a Republican incumbent, right?
Right.
So, so it's a swap, if you will. Republicans get one here, we take that there. Makes the math more complicated, keeps the House majority margin down if that's where they get. So you're just looking at this map where Republicans thought most of this, or at least half of this, would be red. That's not the case. Democrats are still on their heels because the margin's so close. You know, they can only lose 5.
The interesting thing is, if one takes from this night, and again, we're still waiting for results to come in, but if one takes from this night that the Republicans nominating some extreme candidates ultimately hurt their ability to reclaim as much of a majority as they want. They still are on track to reclaim the House. The fact is, though, that narrower majority, and who knows if it's going to be 5 votes or 20, but that narrower majority is actually only going to empower the extremists that are going to win, who are in the Republican Party, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world, because they will, their votes for McCarthy as Speaker and for whatever are going to be so much more important that actually the irony of so many extremists losing is going to empower the extremists who remain.
Right. Kevin McCarthy, assuming he is the Speaker, and it looks as if he will be, will have a much shorter leash, if you will, to negotiate with Joe Biden, to negotiate with the Senate Republicans. One of the more fascinating dynamics of whether the Senate Republicans take the majority or not is the McCarthy-McConnell relationship, because that is Mars and Venus in terms of how they approach governing. It just is. Now, we don't know the final numbers yet, and I want to emphasize that because remember in 2018, it took a long time to count the districts out in California. Sure. But I was just texting with a very smart Republican who says 20. We'll be lucky to get to 25, right? So that would be, and it could be smaller than that. So what you might get here is, the idea was, is this a big, giant change election? The House number is going to change. I think it's likely, and I'm getting out ahead of our smart people on the decision desk, but I think, based on this, my guess, my experience says Republicans get a majority, but it's not a huge majority, so it's not a ton of change. And then you come over here.
I mean, the only other thing is, like, when George W. Bush got hammered in 2006, he called it a thumping.
Right.
When Barack Obama got hammered in 2010, he called it a shellacking. Right. I don't know that Biden's going to have to come up with a gerund to describe what's happening tonight. It's unclear. But can we look at some of the governor's races right now? Because I'd really like to look at the Arizona race, because that's one where a lot of people are concerned because Kari Lake is an election denier, and 51% of the vote in, she's losing.
Right, and so we won't draw big conclusions tonight, and nobody at home should either, but if you have a Republican swing, but a modest one, a modest Republican majority in the House, we're going to be at the Senate for a long time. The next piece of what happened in 2022 will be these governor's races, because all governor's races are important, but this one we're looking at a half dozen others in the key battleground states. You mentioned an election denier there, 51% of the vote in. That's what you want if you're Katie Hobbs. The question is, what are we missing, right? And so this is where Arizona is decided for the most part. More than 60% of the vote. It's one of the fastest growing areas in America. It's one of the most fascinating political areas in America. Phoenix and the sprawling and growing suburbs around it. Right now, Katie Hobbs has 58%. In the county where Kari Lake for 10 years was an anchor woman in people's homes. That's who she's trying to convince these suburban Republicans, a lot of whom did not vote for Donald Trump. I'm Kari Lake, your anchor, not the Trump acolyte. You get out into these counties, that's where she wants to be the Trump acolyte and run it up here. But let's take a look at Maricopa County. Because
it's D+2, right?
D+2.
And Katie Hobbs is winning by 16, 17 points.
53% of the vote. So we have to check in. Okay. David could tell us what this vote is. The election day vote here is this is the behavior of the voters here follows closely the Trump model because he does have such a base there. So we need to watch that.
Okay.
But if you're Katie Hobbs, that's what you want. That's what you want your margin. But your bulk of your votes, 61% here in Maricopa County. And then you come down here to Pima County, and you've got another 15%. 75% of the vote, 76% of the vote right there in those two counties. Katie Hobbs, again, ahead at 45%. Let's see what that number is when we're up to 65%. You build up the margin with the early vote. The question is, can you hold it when the rest of it comes in? But if you're looking at the map right now, both in the governor's race and in the Senate race here, Mark Kelly running more healthy ahead. Republicans were claiming all sorts of late momentum here. This tells us you have a battleground state as you play it out. And you mentioned the governor's races. You just come back out. And again, sometimes you have to be careful what you see elsewhere in the news, if you will. But right now, that's Senate. Let me come back to the governor's race here. Sorry. Right now, this one is fascinating because the big question was, would the third-party candidate help the Republican to victory in Oregon? We're at 63%. Still a long way to go in counting the races here. The West Coast has been Democratic for so long. Republicans were very eager. When I started covering presidential politics, Oregon was a competitive state in presidential politics.
Oh, I remember flying out there with the George W. Bush campaign in both Washington and Oregon, yeah.
It is not anymore. I mean, it started in the Reagan days. I mean, as you come up here, it is not anymore. Republicans, again, they're looking for trophies, and they're looking to say we're rewriting the map. And I think that's the question. You do not see a dramatic rewriting of the map when you look at the House races so far, and when you look at the governor's races, not yet anyway, you don't see it. Again, if you watched another network, Kathy Hochul was going to be sent home. Kathy Hochul is the now fully elected governor of the state of New York.
And I said at the beginning of the night that a smart Democratic pollster said he was going to be watching three things: the New York governor's race, the New Hampshire Senate race, and the three Democratic congresswomen in the vulnerable and competitive districts in Virginia. And right now we have called New Hampshire for the Democrat. We've called for the Senate race. We've called the New York governor's race for the Democrat. That wasn't necessarily about whether or not Lee Zeldin was going to win, but about how close it was going to be. It wasn't apparently that close. And the Democrats have won 2 out of the 3 seats. So that Democratic pollster, who's not a guy who spins me, he's feeling pretty good right now.
Right. And so again, you come back to, I don't know if irony is the right word, just where we are in the sense that, President Biden is having a better night than even many Democrats thought he was going to have. We're not done yet, but as we get, where are we now? 20 past midnight, so happy Wednesday. He had a better election day as we continue to count into the day after, even though he looks like he's going to, at least in the House, beat the historical average. The Senate is still an open question mark. So you can have a historically pretty good night and still have your life change dramatically, meaning the Republicans take the House with a narrow majority, which makes it even harder, as you noted. And then we still know he could still lose the Senate. The history books will record it as a better than average night, and his daily reality will be miserable.
We don't know about Pennsylvania. We don't know about Georgia, and Nevada is a big question mark.
I just wanted to check this one since we're here at 87.
Oh, okay.
I mean, Fetterman, I just want to look at it because you mentioned it. I just like looking back at the margins. And, Fetterman's holding on. And again, where are the votes missing? You come in here.
Philly.
That's mostly Oz would have to really overperform, not win the suburbs, but with all the votes down here, Oz needs to would have to really amp it up in the suburbs. We don't see it yet, but we have to, that's why we count them.
So let's talk about Fetterman for 1 second, because I think a lot of people thought that, first of all, Oz had momentum going into the race, especially after the Senate debate, where Fetterman had difficulty, and also just that Fetterman's stroke was going to really end his chances. One of the things, I was talking to a top Democrat in Pennsylvania, and he said when Fetterman ran in the primary, he had a strategy about rural votes. One of the ways he racked up he totally ran away with the primary, the Democratic primary, was he won 33 of the Republican, of the rural counties, I'm sorry, the 33 of them by more than 70%. And we were talking about margins earlier in this, having to do with margins in Georgia, margins in North Carolina. I want you to look at 3 rural counties, and we're going to look at how Fetterman did or is doing versus how Biden did. And these are all counties where Biden lost and Fetterman is losing, but it's a question, again, of the margins. So if we could start with Westmoreland County.
Westmoreland's right here. That's where Latrobe and the big Trump rally was, with Fetterman Oz just within the last week.
Okay, so this is, this is 19 points?
19, yeah.
19 points. Fetterman is losing by 19 points. How did...
28.
And Biden lost by 28.
Biden lost by 28. So on the margins, Fetterman is dramatically overperforming Biden in that county.
Jefferson County?
Come down here for that one. Jefferson is here.
Right. So, okay, so 50 points. Fetterman is losing this by 50 points.
Biden lost by
almost 60 points.
59.
And then Somerset County.
Right along the southern border.
Okay, so Fetterman losing by 50, and Biden lost by 56.
Right. And so Fetterman said he was going to campaign in Trump country. He said he was going to win. But winning for him is cutting the margins. 56, that matter. Again, went through this in the Georgia Senate race. The margins matter. And I'll give you one more, because was the mayor of Braddock. He's from all those counties you just mentioned happen to also be on his end of the state. We always focus over here because it's the largest population center. And in close races, Philadelphia and those big crowded suburbs around it. But if you're doing what you need to do out here, the way you knock the other guys off, you're right. You're absolutely right. Those are just 3. You'd find other of the Trump counties, the Republican counties, where Fetterman overperforms Biden. And then look at his home county. Braddock is here in the eastern suburbs of Pittsburgh. It's a small town. He was the mayor. And so he's getting here, what's that? Almost 30 points, right? 28 points?
Yeah.
28 points. Joe Biden wins it by 20. So in a Democratic stronghold, but you look at this, you look at the county and it's blue. It's all blue. Pittsburgh is blue. When you start getting out here, this county's red, right? It's not like across the street. It suddenly gets blue across the street. This part, if you look at the voting precincts, there's a lot of red out here. That's where Braddock is.
Yeah.
And John Fetterman is cutting into the margins.
So that's why it's close.
As well.
That's why it's close. Again, we don't know what's going to happen, but that's why it's close right now. Fetterman, of course, a known quantity, the lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania. Anderson?
Thanks very much. I want to go to Kim La in Arizona. She's at the headquarters of the Republican candidates for governor and Senate, Carrie Lake and Blake Masters. Kim, Carrie Lake spoke moments ago. What is she saying?
Just a few moments ago, Anderson, she delivered a fiery and, a really questionable speech to this crowd at this point. She is trying to make a connection between the mistake that we have seen here in Maricopa County with some of the polling places, some of the tabulation machines that have had trouble trying to read some of these ballots. And she's making that akin to corruption and tying it to the 2020 election lie. I want you to take a brief listen to a portion of what she just said.
And I want you to know we are going to monitor the ballots. We got to work in the system that we have right now. And as they continue to come in and our numbers go up, up, up like they did last time, when we win, first line of action is to restore honesty to Arizona elections.
Let's underscore that there is no evidence of dishonesty or corruption in this election so far. There was a mistake with the tabulators. It was corrected. So then she did also, Anderson, take a turn to asking the crowd to have patience. That is something that we've heard from many of the campaigns here in Arizona, having covered the state a number of times through a number of elections. things can change very quickly. It is obvious for anyone who has covered this state that the leader, the winner who right now at this moment, because we're just looking at the early ballots, that person may not stay in the lead. So what you are hearing from Kari Lake is, yes, she is asking for patience. There are a lot of votes out there that have yet to be counted. It is too early to say who has won in any of these top races. But this connection that we have seen, Anderson, is certainly a touchstone to what may predict what's going to happen in the next few days with the Lake campaign. Anderson?
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Back with the team here in New York. Not a surprise that Kari Lake would be hearkening back to 2020 and trying to create some sort of buffer around her by already sort of talking about corruption.
Throughout this race, she's proven to be probably the least responsible candidate in terms of espousing conspiracy theories, you know, creating sort of this fear that something is going to go wrong in the election process, when very clearly Maricopa County put out a statement clearing up the wrongdoing hours ago. What I think is interesting, you know, we're all kind of trying to decide what's the theme, what lessons can we learn from the results we've seen so far, and I think it's too early to tell. But one thing I did notice is there's a bit of a referendum on election deniers between Bolduc losing, Mastriano losing, and even Zeldin. Now, I'm not saying those are the only reasons those races were lost, but she may actually find that she doesn't fare as well as she was expected to. Voters, I think, are sophisticated enough to realize they don't want to go through that exercise again. What we saw on January 6th, what we saw after Donald Trump lost the election.
It's interesting. President Biden came out, days ago talking about focusing on election liars and January 6th, was criticized for it as having a message that wasn't right. It wasn't an economic message.
Look, he may have been wiser than we knew. And what I will say is that it does seem, the things I see are a lot of people were underestimating Democrats. That's the bottom line. Mandela Barnes, is 80% of the votes count. Mandela Barnes is within 2 points of winning the Senate race. He was written off. He's too left-wing. He's too crazy. There's no possible way. There's something out there that we were not able to pick up on. Tim Ryan put up a heck of a fight. They had to drop $30 million on him to stop him, and he put on a clinic. So there's something happened as we got closer to Election Day, where the polls were telling us one thing, but the people were feeling something very different. And I think the polls actually jump-started something out there.
And just remember, when this started out, let's press rewind, go back maybe 6 weeks, right? 6 weeks ago, it was going to be a close race for the House, or maybe even go to the summer. The House was going to be close. The Senate was out of reach for Republicans, never going to happen. And then, the narrative started shifting, and it became this, the Republicans are going to win this wave. The Senate's going to fall. The House is going to be gone by 40 votes.
That's what you said.
I was never saying that. I'm always like, look, cautiously optimistic here. But, the narrative was probably, neither of those narratives were true, right?
Yeah.
The narrative that was true was it's going to be a close race along the way, the whole way.
Listen,
and here we are on election night. Democracy wins.
For almost the entire year, there was an anticipation that this was going to be a very strong Republican year for a whole range of reasons. There was a brief period during the summer where it looked like a Category 5 storm would be a Category 3 storm, but it may not even be a Category 3 storm. But getting back to Kari Lake, she is the sort of warrior queen of election denial. So, she built her whole campaign around it. She's told reporters consistently she wouldn't agree that she would accept the results of the election. And I suspect if she doesn't win, she was laying the predicate there for not accepting the results of the election. But we should point out that half the vote is in Arizona. Most of it was, I think maybe all of it came in early vote, mail-in vote, favored Democrats. The vote that's yet to be counted is the vote that was cast today, and it figures to be heavily Republican. So these races are very much in the air. But it really is outrageous that, she really is sort of a more refined version of Donald Trump.
Refined? I don't even.
Well, no, in terms of her presentation.
Oh, better lighting, maybe. Better lighting.
Better lighting and better makeup.
Yes, exactly. I don't know with better lighting and better makeup, but the storyline is the same, which is I win or the election was stolen. There's no third. I hope that you're right that what the what we saw tonight in some of these other races was a repudiation of that kind of politics.
Well, when you're voting for governor, you're not voting and say, oh, that person's an election denier. You're voting for somebody who has an impact on your everyday life. And Kari Lake, so far as I could tell, is talking more about the past and denial and Donald Trump and riding those coattails. And for tonight, what we've seen so far, those coattails are not so long. And so she may have been barking up the wrong tree here. I mean, we don't know the answer to that. McCarthy may have been barking up the wrong tree, thinking he was going to have a huge majority. If he doesn't have a huge majority tonight, his life is not going to be easy. He's going to have a really uncontrollable caucus, not to change the subject from Kari Lake, but that's a whole other interesting storyline here.
A couple of things that are jumping out to me. You have a country that is very dissatisfied with its government. Obviously, I mean, right track, wrong track is off the map. Very dissatisfied with inflation. Biden is not overwhelmingly popular, although 45, 46 is different than being at 40.
Right.
Congress is not popular. And yet, again, a lot of votes to count. It may be that the country sends a relatively similar Congress back to, I mean, there's a little bit of a shift in the House, possibly very little shift in the Senate. It's interesting to me. The other thing that is jumping out is Republicans getting close in a lot of these races, but not being able to close the deal. And I want to dig into this later, but it must be independent voters, because it strikes me that Republicans back Republicans, Democrats back Democrats. The Republican anticipation was that independents were so sour on Biden and the direction of the country that they would just break Republican.
Yeah.
And it may be even if they just broke evenly, that was enough to help Democrats just hold off in some of these close races. And I don't know. To me, the story about the independent voter and what they want is really something to dig into.
I think the other thing is we may have underpolled young people. I think there's something happening because I'm hearing from people who are still standing in line on campuses for 2 hours after the polls closed wanting to vote. Biden actually performed very well for young people when you talk about student loan stuff, marijuana, climate, and there's that concern about abortions out there. We missed something. We missed something. It's whether it's the independent voters or the young voters or something out there. But I think that what you're going to look at tomorrow morning, some of this stuff is going to go back more in a red direction. There's some blue mirage stuff going on. But I think everybody's going to have to look in the mirror and say, I don't think that we understand what the American people are going through. This much economic pain should have resulted in a revolt against the Democrats.
Just on this one point of young people, there were enormous lines in Michigan where there's an abortion, constitutional amendment on abortion that is on the ballot there. University of Michigan, I was told today, 4-hour lines to vote. And so it may be that in places, in Wisconsin, 90% turnout in Dane County, where the University of Wisconsin is, that is a place where abortion, I think, is a concern because of the legislature and potentially the change of governors. So where it's really in jeopardy or on the ballot, I think young people have been highly motivated.
Coming up, more votes, more projections on this very exciting election night as we watch vote counting play out live in Nevada. Stay right there. It is right after the break. We'll bring you there.
Welcome back to Election Night in America. We have some CNN projections for you for some House races. In Texas, the 34th Congressional District, Congressman Vicente Gonzalez defeats Mayra Flores. Vicente Gonzalez is the winner in that race in Texas. In Illinois' 13th Congressional District, Democrat Nikki Budzinski has flipped an open seat that was gerrymandered to become more blue. She's a former Biden administration official. She will defeat Regan Deering. And then in New Jersey's 7th Congressional District, Republican Thomas Kean Jr. has defeated incumbent Congressman Tom Malinowski. Malinowski is the incumbent. Kean Jr., the former New Jersey Senate Republican leader, and also son of the former New Jersey governor and chair of the 9/11 Commission, Tom Kean. Let's look at the balance of power right now. 218 seats are needed to control the House of Representatives, 165 seats. The Democrats have 165, including 2 pickups. Republicans have 190 seats, including 7 pickups, 80 seats remaining right now. The state of play right now when it comes to those competitive seats, those 82 competitive seats we've been looking at the entire night. Republicans need to win 21 of them. Democrats need to win 40 of them. So Republicans have an easier task ahead of them. Let's look at these other two races right now that are very interesting as votes are coming in. In Colorado's 7th and 3rd congressional district, Lauren Boebert, the incumbent Republican congresswoman, a firebrand, some would say an extremist, is currently losing. She's 8,551 votes behind her Democratic challenger, Adam Frisch, with 80% of the vote in. That is a surprising result as of now. It is not the end. We're still looking at the votes. They're still counting them. And then in New York, at the 17th congressional district, Sean Maloney, who is in addition to being an incumbent congressman, he is the chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He is losing with 85% of the vote in to Michael Lawler, a local state representative. We also have some governor's races for you right now. Boris Sanchez has those.
Jake, we have a pair of projections to bring you, both of them Democratic holds. First, in the state of New Mexico, incumbent Democrat Michelle Lujan Grisham, the only Latina governor in the United States. She defeats former TV weatherman Mark Ronchetti for another 4 years in New Mexico. In the state of Connecticut, another Democratic win. Incumbent Democrat Ned Lamont winning his rematch against Bob Stefanowski. This race decided by 3 percentage points last time around, a much bigger margin this time, securing another 4 years for Ned Lamont. Let's take a look at some key race alerts now. 4 races where Democrats are defeating either election deniers or election questioners, starting with Arizona. Katie Hobbs right now 172,000 votes ahead of Kari Lake, 52% of the vote in Arizona. Let's get an update now from Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer, the incumbent Democrat, 133,000 votes ahead of conservative commentator Tudor Dixon, 62% of the vote in Michigan. As we take a look at Wisconsin, a very close race there. Joe Biden won this state by only about 20,000 votes last time. That's roughly the advantage that incumbent Democrat Tony Evers has right now, about 25,000 votes ahead of Tim Michels, with 83% of the vote in Wisconsin. We also have an update to bring you in the state of Kansas. This race, very, very close. Incumbent Democrat Laura Kelly, perhaps the most vulnerable incumbent Democrat on the entire map, 24,000 votes ahead right now of Derek Schmidt, with 86% of the vote in Kansas. And we have a bonus projection to bring you in a Secretary of State race in Georgia. This guy became a household name after the 2020 election. Brad Raffensperger caught on tape as Donald Trump tried to convince him to find 11,000 votes in the Peach State. Raffensperger refused. Donald Trump made him a target, but he wins re-election as the Secretary of State in Georgia. Let's turn it over to Casey Hunt now. You've got an update for us on Senate races, Casey.
Yes, and we are going to start, as we always have, it seems, this evening in that same state, which is Georgia. Raphael Warnock has actually ticked into the lead here, but man, look how close this is. 12,631 votes right now of literally millions. You can see it on the screen, separating Warnock from Walker. Again, both under 50%. Question remains, can someone get to the point where they avoid a runoff, or are we looking at 4 more weeks of this fight that we have seen? 94% of the vote in Georgia. Let's check in now on Pennsylvania, which is turning out to be our other linchpin. John Fetterman, 49.2%. Mehmet Oz, 48.3%. You heard Jake and John King really breaking down where some of the votes are out. Here, Fetterman seems to be outperforming what Biden did in some of the rural counties, but we're still waiting on those big numbers in counties like Philadelphia. 88% of the vote in, but this really could be where the Senate hinges. Now let's take a look at Wisconsin. Ron Johnson sitting at 51.6%. He is doing better than the Republican gubernatorial candidate, and Mandela Barnes is underperforming the sitting governor, Tony Evers. 51.6% to 48.2% for this race. Still very close, but Johnson right now doing what he needs to do with 83% of the vote in here. Now let's check in on Arizona, where Mark Kelly is sitting at 57.2%. Pretty comfortable lead over Blake Masters, who's got 40.5%. It's tightened a little bit since the last time we took a look at this. We really need to know where we're still waiting on votes to fully understand what this means at this hour of the night. We've got 53% of the vote in Arizona, Jake.
All right, Casey. Wow, lots of votes still out there. And John King and I are going to dive into Georgia, where 6% of the vote is remaining outstanding. Raphael Warnock has taken a slight lead At 49.1%, he's 12,000 votes ahead. So what are we looking for? We're going to tell you right after this quick break. All right, so here we are back at the Magic Wall with John King, and he's going to tell us what's going on in Georgia right now. Neither Warnock nor Walker is above 50%. So if it were to stay like this, it would go to a runoff. But let's forget that for now and just tell me, where is the outstanding vote and how are they performing?
So we've got 6% still outstanding here, and let's just take a look at where it is across the state. And again, if you're joining us or haven't been with us earlier in the night, the larger the circle, the bigger slice of the outstanding vote is within that circle. The blue says the Democrat is leading in this area. The red says the Republican is leading, doesn't mean they'll win, but leading in that area. So where are the largest circles, right? Most of them are right here in Atlanta and the suburbs, and they are by far, the biggest slice of the vote still outstanding to be counted is in these Democratic areas. So, but your eyes tell you advantage Warnock when you look at that. I just want to caution you, look at how many other counties. There are votes out everywhere, right? In some of these counties, it's a very small percentage of vote that's out, but you have these counties where Herschel Walker, it's tiny. It's less than 1/2% of the population.
Well, that's 10,000 votes.
Right, but if you add a couple, hundred here, you add a couple hundred here. So you have to be careful. We need to count them all. In a state this close and this competitive, sometimes you can just say, there's 100,000 votes out here. The margins were done. This state is so competitive, and you have a lot of Republican votes still to be counted. But your eyes don't lie. The biggest proportion of the vote, let me come up here, I moved the map a little bit, is here. And we're getting into the suburbs right around Atlanta, where most competitive races in statewide elections in America are decided in the suburbs. Cobb County, where it's a 14-point advantage right now, 15-point advantage right now for Senator Warnock. Still a good chunk of votes out there. Fulton County is Atlanta, the largest county in the state. Atlanta here, suburbs to the north and south, about 10% of the state population. Again, Joe Biden won this county by 46. Senator Warnock's doing better than that. If you add it all up there, so he's doing well. Then you come out here, you start moving out to the suburbs. Gwinnett County, 18-point Biden win there. Again, you're looking at 21 right there. So Warnock is overperforming Biden in most of these counties where you still have a large percentage, or a decent percentage, I should say, a decent share of the outstanding votes as you see the circle. So you come back in. Again, the only cautionary tale is we have seen this happen before watching Trump races when these counties start to come in. And again, this is at 1.1, it's 21 in terms of the 159 counties in terms of population size, but it's an 18-point win there. So Herschel Walker will pick up some votes here, which tells you, if I'm sitting in the Warnock campaign headquarters, I'm reasonably optimistic looking that, but if we have lived through Georgia elections, we're going to count these. And then, again, we're going to have to count them to the end, and then we're going to have to see if who's ever on top then is above 50, and December 6th if the answer is no.
Neck and neck. Let's drive up I-95. You know where I'm heading?
You're heading home.
Pennsylvania.
So we'll bring it up right here and look at it. This one here, 56,735 votes for the Democrat, 89%. Let's do the same. Let's just take a look at where I still have outstanding votes here. And this, your eyes here don't lie, and it's a little more significant. Yes, you have some tiny dots in these tiny rural counties, but they're tiny, which means it's a very small percentage of the outstanding vote. What do we mean by that? 99% reported here. You move over here just to check the numbers here. Potter County, 99%. So when you see just the little, very tiny dots, we're not talking many votes here.
It's a speck.
Right. So then you see where are the bigger circles? They're in Allegheny County, where John Fetterman is romping. This is his home county. Braddock, Pennsylvania is where he was the mayor before lieutenant governor. That's right here. That is, to borrow a term from a past midterm, a shellacking in Allegheny County. And then you come over here to the birthplace of one Jake Tapper, Philadelphia, and the suburbs around it. So we'll come straight in first. I just crossed the border there. You told me not to do that earlier.
Don't go to New Jersey,
Yeah, that's bad. So we'll start here in Chester County, and then we'll move our way toward Philadelphia. Very competitive, right? It's a very competitive county. Still a lot of votes out here. So the Democrat is leading, which is why you see the blue circle.
How is Fetterman doing in Chester County compared to how Biden did?
So this was 17 points. So it's closer.
Much closer.
Oz is running much closer.
Oz is
running much closer, and that's the test, right? So that's why you have to watch it. So then we'll come over here to Delaware County, or Delco, if you're going to correct me right here. And again, so 35 to 60, 25,
But Oz, again, is overperforming Trump.
26, yeah, it's closer there, closer to the average there. But yes, and again, if he's overperforming a little bit, if you want to look at it that way, we can come out here. Let's take this away. You raised the question in that time, in that context, so let's look at it that way. And let's look at it here.
Where is Oz outperforming Donald Trump in 2020?
Not many places.
Not many places.
Not many places. So Mehmet Oz is outperforming Donald Trump. When this pulls away, you just mentioned.
Oh, it's just Chester County.
It's just Chester County.
Okay.
So if you're looking at the Trump map, you're saying, and Donald Trump lost Pennsylvania, remember? And so you're looking at it this way, and so you come at it a different way. If you want to bring this around, Dem underperformed Biden. There's some counties, but they're mostly red counties. But again, Chester County is going to come back up here. But Fetterman is slightly underperforming Biden. This is why we're still counting votes here, right? You come in here, it's Bucks County earlier on. Remember early on, Fetterman had a very big lead in Bucks County. That has shrunk as you count the day of, election day votes, right? Biden wins it by 4.4. We're right in that ballpark, or literally right in that ballpark, if you look at it right there. Then you come here to Montgomery County. Oz had a late campaign event here. Biden wins by 26.2. Again, you're right in that ballpark when you look at it. But this is it. So we still have votes to count in the Philadelphia suburbs here. Let's just check. We checked Chester a minute ago, and then we come right in to the city. In Philadelphia City, Fetterman is running it up, and only 69%. This, remember 2020, you had votes here counted all the way into Saturday.
Yeah.
And so we're going to...
Very tough to read the tea leaves on either one of these races. We're staying on top of these close Senate races in Georgia and Pennsylvania. We're going to go live to both of those battlegrounds next. Stay with us. It's election night in America, and the final polls are about to close in the United States. Let's give you a look at what the balance of power in the U.S. Senate is right now. Obviously, 100 seats in the U.S. Senate. Democrats have 46 of them. Republicans have 46 of them. There are 8 seats remaining. Remember, Republicans only need to pick up one net Democratic seat in order to wrest control of the Senate from the Democrats. So far, they're not there yet. Let's look at the House of Representatives now. 435 seats. Democrats have 167 of them with 2 pickups. Republicans have 190 of them with 7 pickups. 78 seats remain, needed to control 218. Republicans need, well, we'll start with Democrats. Democrats need to win 38 of the competitive seats. 38 of them. Right now they're leading in 35 of them. Republicans need to win, we're going to bring that up, 21 of them. 21 competitive seats, and they're leading in 22 of them. So right now, Republicans in the House are doing what they need to do, but the votes are still coming in. Casey Hunt, tell us what's going on in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, so the question is who is doing what they need to do to pick up that one critical seat or hold it if you're the Democrats. And we actually want to make a little change here and start in Pennsylvania, where John Fetterman is holding his lead as the votes are rolling in. 49.4 to 48.1%. Look at that. We've got nearly 90% of the vote in Pennsylvania. And of course, if we've still got a lot of vote out in Philadelphia, that's going to be critical. This would make up for a Republican loss, potentially in a state like Nevada, and allow us to focus in on Georgia, because the Senate control could again come down to this race. And if it goes to a runoff, if these numbers hold the way they are, then, of course, we've got 4 more weeks of questions about who's in charge. Raphael Warnock, the incumbent, currently sitting at 49.2%. Herschel Walker at 48.7%. As John King was walking us through, Democrats are optimistic that Warnock may be able to pull this out based on where the outstanding vote still is. But we have seen this stick below 50% really all night, and 95% of the vote is in Georgia. All right, let's head now to Wisconsin. We'll check in on Ron Johnson. This race has been held in pretty steady, 50.6% for the incumbent Republican to the Democrat Mandela Barnes, 49.2%, 88% of the vote now in Wisconsin. And finally, let's take a quick look at Nevada. So this is a place that Democrats have been worried about all night. Early numbers show Catherine Cortez Masto holding at 54.3% to the Republican Adam Laxalt at 43%, but only 44% of the vote has been counted here. And the Democrats I've been talking to all evening have been concerned about their performance in Clark County. So we're going to have to check in and see where the votes are out there. But now, Boris, I know you've got some critical updates for us in the governor's race.
Yeah, and we're going to get you an update on the gubernatorial race in Nevada as well. But first, let's take a look at the state of Michigan. Incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer locked in a tough re-election battle against conservative commentator Tudor Dixon. Right now, she holds about a 6% advantage, 166,000 vote lead, with 66% of the vote in Michigan. Let's get a look now at the state of Arizona. The Secretary of State there, Katie Hobbs, 166,000 votes ahead of former TV anchor and election denier Kari Lake, 54% of the vote in Arizona. Let's take a look at that Nevada governor's race now, because Steve Sisolak, the incumbent Democrat, facing some very strong economic headwinds. Inflation is disproportionately affecting people in Nevada compared to other states. He's currently leading the sheriff of Clark County, Joe Lombardo, by about 43,000 votes, with 44% of the vote in there. We have an update for you, a key race alert from Wisconsin as well. Incumbent Democrat Tony Evers, last time we checked in, his lead was at about 25,000 votes. Now it's at about 73,000 votes over Tim Michaels, with 88% of the vote in Wisconsin. And it just changed again, that lead thinning by about 2,000 votes for Evers. Let's get an update for you from perhaps the weirdest governor's race you're going to see tonight in the state of Oregon. This is a three-way race between these three women: Tina Kotek, the Democrat, Christine Drazen, the Republican, and former Democrat turned independent Betsy Johnson, who could potentially play spoiler for the Democrats tonight, opening the door for Drazen to become the first Republican in 40 years to become governor of Oregon. But right now, Kotek is in the lead by about 13,000 votes, with 65% of the vote in. As we send it back to Jake Tapper, only a 1 percentage point difference in that race, Jake.
All right, thanks so much, Boris. Appreciate it. Kate Baldwin is in Pennsylvania, in Newtown specifically, outside Philly. She's at the headquarters of Republican Senate candidate Dr. Mehmet Oz. And first of all, Kate, that is not exactly the site of a jubilant celebration. It looks like a high school dance just past midnight. And I'm wondering what you're hearing from the Oz folks.
Yeah, I will tell you, that was exactly what I was going to tell you. This party, for all intents and purposes for tonight, is completely shut down. But I will say noteworthy, about 90 minutes ago at 11:30, Mehmet Oz came out to speak to his supporters, to thank his supporters for being here. And here are two key lines. He was projecting confidence in that moment, saying, when all the ballots are counted, we believe we will win this race. He did acknowledge that it was he expected it to be a very long night still ahead, saying, we've been closing the gap all night and we have a lot more ballots to go. Also talking about hitting on what really were, as we've talked about throughout the evening, his final closing argument, what the campaign has thought was their best closing message that they thought was really having an impact, talking about bringing balance to Washington, uniting, not dividing. Those were the remarks that Mehmet Oz presented to his supporters in this room about 90 minutes ago. And as of now, this party shut down.
Yeah, I mean, it's a powerful message, except then a few days later, he, of course, went and appeared with Doug Mastriano and Donald Trump, not exactly uniting, not dividing. This is images right now. There's you, Kate, and there's me. They're watching CNN at Fetterman headquarters in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That is quite a different image than the image we just saw of the empty gymnasium at Oz headquarters.
He was projecting confidence in that moment, saying, when all the ballots are counted, we believe we will win this race. He did acknowledge that it was a lot. I mean, this is...
Okay, we got some weird echoes going on here now, so let's just go to you.
A little tape delay in the signal there at Fetterman, so they're a little behind picking it up, so they'll hear what I'm saying in about 10 seconds.
But also, I mean, I just have to, I know we're going to do House in a second, but just...
come on over. Come on over. Let's take a look.
You want to do Pennsylvania?
No, we can do whatever you want to do. I was just looking at some of these governor's
quite
races.
a stark difference between the abandoned Newtown High School in Pennsylvania, where the Oz headquarters is, and the jubilant rally at Fetterman headquarters when, votes are still being counted. What's going on in Pennsylvania right now?
So you bring it up right here, right now. That's the Fetterman campaign headquarters. You can hear them there. 65,957 vote. It's in a big Commonwealth like Pennsylvania. You say that's a narrow margin. If you've lived through recent elections there, you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, how are we doing? So they're out here, Fetterman campaign headquarters. Excuse me 1 second. It's a little dry throat there, but look at this. I mean, this is just, again, Joe Biden wins Allegheny County by 20 points. John Fetterman outperforming him.
By 28 points.
By 28 points in the second largest population center in the state. Win big where the people are, that helps you. John Fetterman is doing it right there in Allegheny County. Then you move to the east, Philadelphia. You bring up Philadelphia, again, running it up, 70%. This is important. Remember the presidential election when we were counting votes Thursday into Friday into Saturday when we finally called it? Joe Biden had a big lead like that. They still had votes to count, right?
Right.
There's no guarantee they come in at 80 to 17, but if they keep coming in disproportionately that way in the largest area by far, 12%, 12.5% of the population, that is good news for Fetterman.
There's no guarantee that they're going to come in at 80.8 and 17.5, but they're likely going to come in at something like this.
They came in. I kept saying this to be careful for 3 days during the 2020 count. They came in almost exactly.
Right. I mean,
were.
because you have so much of it. It's 69%, not 1%. It's probably like this, and the margin, 63.5, is pretty much exactly what this margin is. That margin is what Biden did over Trump.
Right. And so Fetterman is tracking Biden in the most Democratic area of the state. And again, then you come to Montgomery County first, 26 for Biden. You know, you're in right in the same ballpark.
Exactly the same.
Right
Exactly the same.
So you see the narrow Fetterman lead, like the Biden lead. Bucks County, this is the one they wanted to make a lot more competitive, and it is. This is the most competitive of the color counties around. It's at 5% of the state population, 4.4 for Biden. Again, you're looking
It's
at
about 4.4.
Yeah,
I mean, Fetterman is matching at this point, at this snapshot, this moment in time. Fetterman is matching what Biden did in this very important Democratic area, capital D Democratic, of Pennsylvania.
Right. So voters are seeing Oz, at least more and more voters are seeing Oz as acceptable to them, if you look at it that way, than did when you look at the gubernatorial candidate, where Josh Shapiro is, Mastriano is not coming close to Oz in many of these places. And we've talked earlier tonight about the issues positions and the profile of Doug Mastriano, and you see that happening. Again, other conversations about election deniers being rejected. So as you watch this one play out again, close elections are decided here, and Democrats need a boost out there. Fetterman's getting the boost he needs out there, and he's getting good margins here. I just want to come up to Northampton County right here. This is just one of my, I go back to my swing counties. Normally, the person who wins Northampton County carries the Commonwealth. Donald Trump carried it narrowly, won the Commonwealth, won the presidency. Biden flipped it, won the Commonwealth, won the presidency. At the moment, John Fetterman winning what Pennsylvanians will tell you, pretty critical swing county right there. Doesn't guarantee it, but again, you look here in a close election, and it has stayed right there. So what you do now is, you have Kate out there, we have other people out there, we'll check in to see where are they going to keep counting throughout the night, where might we have to come back at this in the morning. But even if I'm not saying they're done, if you went to bed right now and you're John Fetterman, and you look at where the live outstanding votes are, or that's, if you want to, let me flip it. If you want to understand why the Oz party is quiet,
about why the Oz party is non-existent.
Right. The size of the circles is the share of the outstanding vote. The color tells you who is leading in that area.
What is it, Philly and Delaware County? Is Delaware County, how many votes are outstanding in Delaware County?
That's Chester.
Delco.
Yeah, Delco. We're out here. We're out here in Chester, and we come into Delco.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and so you got...
They only have 37% reporting, and this is going to be a district that Fetterman takes by at least 25 points.
Right, 27-point district for Biden when you round up. So, yes.
But I'm just saying, this is a ton of Fetterman votes that haven't been counted.
Yes, barring some huge surprise, right? Again, there's never a guarantee, but to your point about Philadelphia, we saw this happen in 2020. They came in within a point or two as they continued to flow in, and then you come up, we're pretty close in Montgomery County, where Fetterman's running high, and there's a smaller share still out. In Bucks County is up to 93%. So just to reiterate your point, Oz is competitive here, right? So even though it's blue, Fetterman's leading. Oz will get some votes here because he's competitive here. Fetterman's running way ahead here, but there's not that many more votes to come in. But then you come over here, the circle gets bigger in a place. This is more competitive, Chester County here. But when you, as Jake just noted, in Delaware County, right here, a larger share of the votes out and a much bigger lead for John Fetterman. Which is why, if you're looking at this, here's where you are in the race. 65,000 votes, 66,000 votes ahead if you come up. Jake, let's go back to you.
That's right, John, because CNN has a major projection. CNN projects that Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman will be the next U.S. Senator from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This is a pickup. Retiring Senator Pat Toomey is a Republican, and the Democrats are now taking that Senate seat back. Again, CNN is projecting that John Fetterman will be the next U.S. Senator from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And look, we're going to watch as the people in Fetterman headquarters get that news in 1 second. In any case, to bring us up to speed in the balance of power, 100 Senate seats, Democrats have 47 of them, including one pickup. Republicans have 46 of them. 7 seats remain. Republicans need to pick up one net Democratic seat. Right now, they're not there, and Democrats just picked up one Republican seat. Dana Bash.
Absolutely huge, huge news, a huge development. As Jake said, a pickup in Pennsylvania, but also a kind of moral victory for Democrats on a national level, because this was where they went. I mean, President Biden basically was there so much. Oh, there you go. Look at how excited the people in Fetterman headquarters are right now as they not only understand that their candidate won against some pretty big odds, but they're enjoying seeing it being projected on CNN.
And Dana, you know, one thing I really cannot get out of my head, just going back to earlier in the night when we saw those exits coming out of Pennsylvania, that basically said that voters had made Fetterman's health as an issue a wash. And then on the question of, has Oz lived long enough in the state to represent it effectively, 55% said no. To me, that was, I think, probably the first sign that we had tonight that something was going to be happening in Pennsylvania. Republicans thought this race was over after that debate. They thought that it had disqualified Fetterman, and the voters tonight said something totally different. They were wrong.
I think, Abby, this was a personal judgment. And yes, obviously, John Fetterman had a stroke, and he still shows the effects of it. But voters were saying, we trust this guy, we think that he's there for us, and they just didn't feel that about Mehmet Oz. They thought he, was a guy who came in to try to pick up a seat across a state line, and that he wasn't there for them. I think it was a personal endorsement of their faith in Fetterman, and really kind of a personal rejection of Mehmet Oz.
I should also say, what they're seeing in Fetterman headquarters is a delay of CNN, which is why you're seeing us kind of twice. We are expecting John Fetterman to come out soon. We talked earlier in the night about how this has been a race of two very strong, very distinct personalities. And it was certainly a national race, but also about these two men, like you were both talking about. I think we also need to note that this is very much a proxy battle and has been between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Yeah. And on this one, Joe Biden won. Yeah. He was there so many times. And the only reason Mehmet Oz is and was the nominee for the Republicans is because of Donald Trump.
I mean, Joe Biden is a native son of Pennsylvania and really leaned into that really hard. But what made this impossible, frankly, for Mehmet Oz at the end was that
here he is. He's coming out.
John Fetterman.
And finish your thought.
What made it impossible for Fetterman or for Oz was that he was trying to sell two different messages, appearing with Trump while also
let's listen in.
From him.
I'm not really sure what to say right now. My goodness. Yeah. I am, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I'm so humbled. Thank you so much, really. Thank you. Thank you. Like what is it? It's like 1:30 in the morning and you're still here hanging in? We launched this campaign almost 2 years ago, and we had our slogan. It's on every one of those signs right now. Every county, every vote. Every county, every vote. And that's exactly what happened. We jammed them up. We held the line. I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue, but we did what we needed to do, and we had that conversation across every one of those counties. And tonight, that's why I'll be the next U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania. Thanks to all of you. All of you. Thank you. Thank you so much. That made me grateful right now. And I want to thank, of course, all these supporters all across Pennsylvania, all in this room, all across the nation, everyone that chipped in $10 to help us get here. Thank you. And also I also really want to thank my family. My mother, my father, Carl, Susan, my brother Greg. Where's Giselle? Where's Giselle? Everyone's favorite, yeah, Giselle. Who 6 months ago, she saved my life. Walking out of a Sheetz bathroom, she recognized what was happening. And also, and my children, Carl, Grace, August, hey, yeah, hey. So everyone, and just thank you. And I also want to thank my team as well, the best team. So many names, Brendan, my campaign manager, Rebecca, Bobby, Joe, Jason, everybody, all my team. So many that made that part of it. And also thank all of the supporters. Also, I'm just so proud of the race that we ran. And this campaign has always been about fighting for everyone who's ever been knocked down, that ever got back up. This race is for the future of every community all across Pennsylvania. For every small town or person that ever felt left behind, for every job that was ever been lost, for every factory that was ever closed, for every person that works hard but never ever get ahead. I'm proud of what we ran on. Protecting a woman's right to choose, raising our minimum wage, fighting the union way of life. Healthcare is a fundamental human right. It saved my life, and it should all be there for you when you ever should need it. Standing up to corporate greed, making more things right here in America and right here in Pennsylvania, and standing up for our democracy. 20 years ago, I came to Braddock to start a GED program.
And you're listening to John Fetterman giving his victory speech in Pennsylvania, a remarkable turn of events in a very closely watched and vitally, obviously important race to Democrats in this election. David Urban, I got to go to you, son of Pennsylvania.
So listen, it's incredibly hard for me to watch. Obviously, this is the Pat Toomey seat, and before that, it was my former boss's seat, Arlen Specter, who held it so proudly for so many years. And it's a big loss for Pennsylvanians, for Republicans in Pennsylvania. Listen, I wish John Fetterman the best. He won tonight. He's got to do a great job for all Pennsylvanians, all 12 million. Congratulations and good luck. We need him to do the best job. But look, it's a big blow for Republicans and Republicanism in the state of Pennsylvania. And this is a loss, which I think is going to reverberate across the United States.
Amendment Oz was handpicked by Donald Trump.
Handpicked by Donald Trump, right? My good friend Dave McCormick ran the race. I supported Dr. Oz's opponent in this race, who I think would have been a far stronger candidate in this race and would probably be up there giving a speech tonight instead of John Fetterman. And so a lot of people are going to ask questions about, can you lay this loss at the feet of the president, the former president? People are going to ask that coming tomorrow and the day after in Pennsylvania.
And what's
you lost the governor? You lost the governor. You lost the governor's mansion and a Senate race in Pennsylvania tonight. And I know Republicans across the Commonwealth are pretty upset right now.
This is a bad night for him.
Before we bury Donald Trump, I think we should.
I'm not burying Donald Trump.
I think we should praise John Fetterman because it is very hard to do what he did.
Yep.
In that this guy was he was at death's door. He had a serious stroke. He might not have been here tonight alive at all, and he decided to stick it in there and to fight for it. And I thought it was a terrible idea for him to do that debate. But that's the kind of guy that he is. He didn't want to back down from that challenge. And I criticized him. A lot of people criticized him. But people saw some heart in him and some guts in him that they want to see in themselves. And I just think before we turn into political, what a triumph for a human being to do what he just did.
My argument isn't with John Fetterman's health or his personality. It's with his policies. Let's just make it clear.
Sure. I just want to make sure.
Exactly what Dr. Oz should have said in that debate, rather than cruelly making fun of Fetterman in that debate. I actually think, when I watched that debate, clearly Fetterman struggled. And so, yeah, you asked yourself, how is this going to affect the race? But there's a fundamental humanity to the guy. And there was a kind of cruelty to Dr. Oz that I think, in some ways, he was as revealed by that debate as Fetterman was. But I must say, just in terms of the global implications of this was the seat Democrats had to have.
Right.
This is the insurance policy. We don't know. They're counting votes in Nevada right now. That could go either way. They're counting votes in Georgia right now. That could go either way. Obviously, if Republicans were to win both, they would take.
And this has been a Republican seat in Pennsylvania
for a long time.
I just got to go to Boris Sanchez for a projection.
Yeah, Anderson, an important projection to bring you from the state of Wisconsin in that governor's race. This state was decided by only about 20,000 votes in the last presidential election. As it stands right now, Tony Evers, the incumbent Democrat, excuse me, has nearly tripled that total. He stands to win re-election in the state of Wisconsin, defeating Republican Tim Michels. We also have some key race alerts to bring you, beginning with the state of Arizona. There, Secretary of State Katie Hobbs is leading the unrepentant election denier Kari Lake, 164,000 votes, with 54% of the vote in the state of Arizona. Let's take a look at Nevada now. Steve Sisolak, a very vulnerable Democratic incumbent. Right now, he stands 43,000 votes ahead of the sheriff of Clark County, Joe Lombardo, 44% of the vote in the state of Nevada. Let's get another look at Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer has steadily been building this lead every time we've checked in on this race. She now stands 187,000 votes ahead of conservative commentator Tudor Dixon, 71% of the vote in the state of Michigan. We take a look now at the state of Kansas. This is perhaps the reddest state in which a Democrat gubernatorial candidate was running for re-election. Laura Kelly, 22,000 votes ahead of Derek Schmidt, who questioned the results of the 2020 election. 87% of the vote in Kansas. Let's send it over to Jake Tapper and John King at the Magic Wall.
All right, thanks so much, Boris. And we're taking a look at the balance of power in the U.S. Senate because right now, 50 Democrats are leading, including one pickup in a Republican seat. John Fetterman, the lieutenant governor, is about to become the U.S. senator from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That used to be a Republican seat. That's a pickup. 49 Republicans in the lead, 0 pickups in Democratic seats. So I guess the big questions we have right now are Georgia and Nevada. Is that right?
Right, and we're still looking at Arizona, but if you just want to do the math where we start the day, it was
those three. I'm sorry, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada.
Yeah, it was, so it was 50-50 when we started the day. The vice president breaks the tie, which makes that so huge. So now that's 51 essentially. If you start, 51, and looking at the map right now, and so the Democrats can afford to lose one of theirs, if you will, now, and still have a 50-50 Senate. They're not. I'm not saying they're going to do that, but I'm just saying now you have if you could lose one of the ones you still have. This one, Senator Warnock still ahead. We're up to 95%. Welcome to Georgia, 20,990 votes. Incredibly close here as we watch this one come out. And at the moment, this would be a runoff. No matter who ends up on top, you have to have 50%, plus one vote to get a majority tonight. We'll watch as that one plays out. But Democrats at the moment leading in Georgia. Let's look at Wisconsin, still outstanding here, 88% of the vote. This one here, I was just asking because we know the Republican candidate for governor has conceded, called Governor Evers, and conceded the race. So the Democratic governor, if you come here, is winning this race. A very close race. Very close race, but 72,000 votes, 72,600.
We just projected that Evers
Evers will win. So you see, Senator Johnson has a lead here. Think about the swing. A Democratic governor in a very competitive state leading by 72,694 votes. That's a Democratic governor. And then you come to your Republican incumbent senator with a smaller lead, but in the lead. That tells you a lot of ticket splitting happening across the state of Wisconsin tonight. Can Mandela Barnes make up the difference is the question. So you look at the big Democratic bases, 77%. So there's still a lot of votes to come in Milwaukee, and you see it's a pretty good range there. Are there enough votes out to get there? The math gets dicey, but if you look at that, you say you want to see that number get up to 85, closer to 90%. Before you make any calls, just want to check the other big area, Democratic area in the state is here, Dane County, Madison, College area, 93% there. So some votes still to come in, but a smaller pool of votes there.
Mandela Barnes, by the way, outperforming Biden in Madison.
Yes, Mandela Barnes running a strong race, as is Ron Johnson in a very competitive state. So you're looking here now at the moment, Republicans holding Wisconsin. We'll see if it stands up. Republicans held Ohio. Republicans held North Carolina among the competitive seats. So here we go. We come out. This one, Republicans said they were going to mount a big challenge to Michael Bennet. They did not.
Not so much, not even close.
They simply did not. Actually, let me come back to this for a minute because this is important in the governor's race as well. And we're watching, we can come back when we get over to the House map. There's an interesting dynamic possibly at play there. One of the big questions was because of inflation, and gas prices are higher as you go west in the United States. Because of inflation, because of gas prices, were the suburbs and the crime issue Republicans are using, were the suburbs going to come back to the Republicans because they were mad and frustrated with Democratic governance? Look at what Michael Bennet did in the Denver suburbs. Arapahoe County, 61%. Adams County, 57%. You come into Denver County, 79%. You move over to Jefferson County, close to 60%. Michael Bennet and Governor Polis as well, if you switch it to the governor's race, did even better here. And so you have a country that is unquestionably thinks two-thirds of Americans or more think we're in a recession. Two-thirds or more think we're on the wrong track. We know they're mad about inflation. They clearly don't trust Republicans. You're seeing, you're just seeing in some of these states where you would think, could a Democrat be beat or would that race be more competitive? Not so far. You come over to the Arizona governor's race. Boris was talking about this. Kerry Lake already tonight, irresponsibly, raising questions of shenanigans. They're still counting votes, 54% in. But come back, we were in the Senate math. Mark Kelly running even stronger than Katie Hobbs at 57%. But again, a long way to go here. But again, 75% of the vote in Arizona is in Maricopa and Pima County. And in the count so far, Mark Kelly running healthily ahead here. This is a Democratic +2 for Joe Biden. You see that there. But again,
it's early.
It's early, and most likely that's disproportionately early votes. And then Pima County, again, this was +18 for the Democrats. Mark Kelly running way ahead of that. But we need to see a lot more votes before we can make a judgment about that.
So let's go to Nevada, because Nevada was one of the states where Republicans thought they had the best chance of picking off an incumbent Democratic senator.
Right. She was, and Democrats would concede, Catherine Cortez Masto, the most vulnerable Democratic senator, with the 44% of the estimated vote in. I was just texting with somebody out in Nevada. I'll get to that in a second. She is leading at the moment. Look, this is what matters most right here. Clark County is 74% of the state population. She is leading there right now. Joe Biden won Clark County by 9 points, so she's a little bit ahead of that. She's at 13, just shy of 13 points there at 64%. And then if you come out here, Washoe up here in the northwest corner is another 15% of the population. So we have no votes in here. This tends to be more of a swing. So if you're looking at the Senate map right now, again, can Republicans still get to 50? Yes, they can. Is the math a hell of a lot harder because the Democrats have flipped that? Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah. And we'll have to see what happens. We're still waiting for more votes to come in Arizona and Nevada. And, of course, we're waiting for more votes to come in from Georgia. And we're hearing that Democratic Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock may speak in Georgia imminently about his close race. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy also might come out soon. Stay with us. We'll let you know what they say. Be right back. We can now make a projection in the Senate race in Utah. CNN is projecting that incumbent Republican Senator Mike Lee will be reelected by the good citizens of Utah. He defeats independent candidate Evan McMullen. Let's look at the balance of power in the Senate right now. 100 seats, 47 of them belong to the Democrats, including one pickup in Pennsylvania. 47 of them belong to the Republicans. There are 6 seats remaining. Republicans need to win 2 net Democratic seats in order to win control of the U.S. Senate. We have governor's races for you to talk about now as well. Boris Sanchez has that.
Yeah, Jake, a big projection for CNN. We are projecting that Gretchen Whitmer, the incumbent Democrat in the state of Michigan, will win re-election. She made abortion rights the centerpiece of her campaign. She filed a lawsuit to stop a 1931 abortion ban that took effect after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs decision. She also introduced legislation in that state to expand and protect abortion access. It pays off for her as she defeats Tudor Dixon, a Trump-endorsed election denier, Jake.
All right, Boris Sanchez, thanks so much. And we can now make projections in 3 states that have ballot measures on abortion. CNN projects that Californians have voted yes on establishing a state constitutional right to an abortion. Voters in Michigan have approved a similar ballot measure, saying yes to abortion rights. The trend is holding in Vermont, another yes vote to ensure the right to an abortion. And take a look at Kentucky, a measure that would amend the state constitution to explicitly state that there is no Kentucky constitutional right to an abortion. That is trailing as of right now. Dana Bash.
So fascinating. Thank you so much, Jake. First, let's just talk for a second about these abortion referenda, because we saw what happened over the summer with Kansas. Democrats saw that as a big green light, saying that this is what is going to get our voters to the polls. We have to sift through everything, but if you just look at Michigan and the fact that Gretchen Whitmer, the incumbent Democrat, we're projecting is winning, and Prop 3, the referendum, also is winning, which is pretty broad when it comes to abortion rights.
Yeah, I don't know that it's particularly a surprise that voters in blue states like California and Michigan and Vermont would vote to have a constitutional right to an abortion. But, you know, the canary in the coal mine was what happened in Kansas, a red, solid conservative state, and overwhelmingly they voted not to take away abortion rights in the Constitution. So this clearly was an animating issue, and it was the best issue for Democrats all summer. There was some thought that it might have faded as we got further away from the Dobbs decision. But you look at the results tonight, and people who were pro-choice, pro-keeping rights for abortion won in state after state. And, of course, you see the initiatives, they won as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that, although I would say Michigan, I would characterize Michigan as a clear battleground state, which it's been for a while, which is what made, I think, Gretchen Whitmer's race so important for Democrats. The abortion issue has actually been, pretty clear in this country. Voters largely do not want absolute bans on abortion. They don't necessarily support draconian bans on abortion. They are somewhere in the middle. And when you see these ballot initiatives that either try to establish broad bans on abortion. They are not necessarily succeeding. And where they have been put on the ballot to codify abortion rights, even in blue states, but also in some red states, those have gone through. I think voters in the United States are making their voices heard on this issue.
Abby, I'm going to go to Jake for a projection.
Thanks, Dana. That's right. CNN has a projection for you right now. CNN projects that Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii, the Democrat, will be reelected, defeating Republican Bob McDermott. Let's bring the balance of power on that right now, because we've just added a seat to the Democrats. Democrats is 100 seats in the U.S. Senate. Democrats have 48 of them, including a pickup in a Republican seat. That's Pennsylvania. Republicans have 47. In order for Republicans to wrest control of the U.S. Senate from the Democrats, they now need to win 2 net Democratic seats. 2 net Democratic seats. Casey Hunt, we go to you now with more on the battle for the Senate.
Well, Jake, we can walk through what the possibilities are for Republicans right now and what they aren't. Let's start in Georgia, where Raphael Warnock is still barely ahead of Herschel Walker, the Republican. So this is one where, again, if this holds, we're looking at 4 more weeks of fighting. This could, of course, go either way under those kinds of circumstances. It could all come down to the race here, depending on what happens on the rest of the map. 96% of the vote in there. And let's look at what else is out. Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, the incumbent, sitting at 50.7. This has been pretty steady here as the vote has continued to roll in, that this margin is about the same. Mandela Barnes at 49.1%. We obviously have called the Wisconsin governor's race for the Democrat, but Ron Johnson is on a different path right now with 80% of the vote in there. Let's check in on Nevada, where, of course, Democrats have been pessimistic, or at least they were at the beginning of the night, but obviously their optimism has increased as results have rolled in through the evening. Catherine Cortez Masto currently at 53.3% to the Republican Adam Laxalt's 44%. We have 53% of the vote in here in Nevada. A lot of questions about whether it's mail or how that's all coming in. We're going to have to go to John King and David Chalian for some of those answers. So let's check in on Arizona, where Mark Kelly sitting comfortably ahead of the Republican Blake Masters at 57.2% to Blake Masters 40.5%. If this kind of lead can hold, Democrats can hold there. We're looking at that trio of races, Nevada and Georgia, perhaps Wisconsin, as this night gets later and later, Jake.
All right, Casey, we're tracking the Senate races that are still undecided, including those nail-biters in Georgia and Wisconsin. The battle for control of the U.S. Senate still too early to call. Our coverage continues after this. Welcome back to CNN's Election Night in America. I want to bring you back up to speed on those competitive House races on which hinges all Democrat and Republican hopes to control the U.S. House. Republicans need to win 21 of the outstanding competitive seats that we have decided are still too early to call. Of those 21, Republicans are leading in 24. They are exceeding what they need to do in order to control the House. Of the Senate seats, of the Democratic seats, Democrats need to win 38 of the outstanding competitive seats, 38 of them, and they're leading in 34 of them. Meaning that right now, based on the numbers that we have available this moment, we believe that Republicans are still on their way to achieving what they need to achieve in the 82 total competitive House districts. John.
Clear favorites. Republicans, even now as we approach 2 a.m., are clear favorites to win a House majority, but and it's a big but. There is still a small possibility, modest possibility, I shouldn't call it small, modest possibility Democrats could hold their majority. Did you think we would be having that conversation?
No, this is a big but.
At 2 o'clock in the morning. And if Republicans do win the majority now, because we're getting fewer and fewer races still on the board, it's likely to be a more narrow majority. Here's another way to look at it. You just laid it out the smartest way. I'll get there, building it down just from the top. This is where we stand right now, leading the vote. These are not called races. This is leading the vote, right? But if this were over right now, the Republicans would have a 3-seat majority in the House of Representatives. It's not over, but just think about the narrow realm we're talking about now. You mentioned earlier in the night, Kevin McCarthy earlier in the year said 60 seats. Some Republicans in the last week have been saying 30 seats. We are not in that ballpark. 219, 216 leading right now, right? In terms of called races. 193 to 169. So Republicans clearly are getting close. It's 218. In terms of the called races, they're getting close. This is what you were just talking about here in the races that are still uncalled, and the Democrats leading in more of the competitive seats. You would say that's good for the Democrats. It is good for the Democrats. It's not good enough to prevent a House majority. We're not done yet again. But where we stand right now, it looks like the Republicans are on a path to get a narrow majority. But I just want to step back again and just look at this map. Right? That's not a red wave. That's nothing like a red wave.
Nope.
That could end up being enough for Republicans to get a small House majority, maybe a modest House majority, depending on how you define it. But that is a very competitive map in which a lot of Democrats in frontline districts scratched and clawed their ways to victory. That includes, we talked earlier tonight, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in Virginia, on one off here, where these races are off the board. Let me come out. That's uncalled. Let me come out of there. And you look, Democrats won 2 of the 3. They won this one here, a more Democratic district. They should have won. But if there were a red wave, that would be red. It is not. If there were a big red ripple, this one would be, next one down, sorry. Let me come over here to Abigail Spanberger's district. Even a big red ripple, this one would be red. It is not. And so these frontline Democrats scratched and clawed, not just in Virginia. You come out to Ohio, you see all this blue? They picked up a seat. This is a pickup. That was a Republican incumbent that will now be a new Democratic congressman. So on a night when Democrats were supposed to lose a lot, you'd like to pick up some to offset that. There's one right there in Cincinnati, even though the Republican governor won big, even though the Republican Senate candidate won reasonably comfortably. Marcy Kaptur, again, a veteran Democrat, scratching it out against a January 6th participant who lied about military service. Good candidate beats bad candidate here in Ohio. So you just come back out. You could keep going through these races. Let's go out to Colorado right now. The Democratic governor wins big. The Democratic senator, Republicans said they were going to give him the race of a lifetime. They did not. In the House races right out here, this is Lauren Boebert. Many of you may have heard of her, a more controversial pro-Trump member of the House Republican Conference, only at 83%. There's a ways to go here. There's room for her to catch up. But it's supposed to be the Democrats on their heels, and here you have a Republican incumbent.
But just for people to understand, this is a district that is R+8.
Right.
R+8, and right now, look, she still might pull it out, but the fact that it's so competitive says that there's something going on here that certainly Kevin McCarthy, who, by the way, we expect to come out and speak live at any moment, that certainly Kevin McCarthy did not see coming at all.
Right, and so texting with some House Republicans and Republican consultants more who work with the House consultants, and you're looking at this again. Lauren Boebert has time and room with 83% out. She may still pull this out, but the conversation, sarcastic conversation among Republicans right now is if you're going to have a 5 or 6 seat majority, would you rather have 5 and not her? Because she's one of the agitators, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Lauren Boeberts, the members of the Freedom Caucus, the people who, if Kevin McCarthy has a very narrow majority, are going to be on the phone with Donald Trump all the time. What do you want us to tell him to do? And so that's the calculation now. McCarthy with a 10, 15, 20-seat majority has a leash, has some room, has some maneuverability. McCarthy with a very small majority like that, it'll be a really interesting Washington. And Jake, especially if you take this, it's not a final number, but this is trending toward. It looks like there's still a possibility the Democrats keep the majority. Looks like the Republicans get a relatively narrow majority. And then you come here and you're looking at a map where Mitch McConnell right now, if he hasn't gone to bed, is having one more fine Kentucky bourbon. Because once again, he has looked at a map and said, I have a chance to be the majority leader. And it's still possible, but that is not.
But I also know Mitch McConnell is saying Donald Trump pushed nominees in states that we could have won, and those nominees, whether Mehmet Oz or others, blew it. But Republican leader Kevin McCarthy is about to speak, and we'll bring that to you live. Our election coverage continues with Don Lemon, Poppy Harlow, and Caitlin Collins after this.